Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes, sir. Then again I'm falling. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes, sir. Then again I'm falling. Let Jesus work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Oh, work it out. You work it out for Mother Lisa. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing.
All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos. And today I am joined by somebody you guys probably already know, Jake Julius, Jake Rattlesnake TV. What's going on, brother?
Hey man, thanks for having me. I was enjoying that beat.
You like that?
Introduced. You got to send me that. It's a good song.
All right. Shout out to B-Dive.
B-Dive.
B-Dive, yeah. There's a guy in our Orthodox community. He makes all those. So he's like he likes to sample stuff. So we got like he made like we got like ortho chants, stuff like this that he's added beats to and stuff, and he's got a bunch of cool stuff. But he's made
awesome.
he sent me, so he gave me permission to use all that stuff for my channel. So most people haven't heard of B-Dive. And he's not a professional musician. He's got a full-time job. He's a younger guy like us. But yeah, glad you like that.
Yeah, I love old school like soul music, and then to mix it in with a little bit of worship and stuff is awesome. Plus the nice. Anyways,
yeah, that's his jam, dude. He takes like old like 60s samples, gospel samples, then adds beats to them. And then he makes like really high quality. He'll take ortho chants and then add like a beat to it that isn't like degrading. It's not like a rap song, but it gives it a kind of a different flavor to it. So yeah, shout out to B-Dive. I got a bunch of his stuff on my channel. I've created like videos for his song. So yeah, everybody loves his stuff.
Good stuff.
So today we're going to be diving into really so much to talk about in regards to the state of the West. I appreciate you having me on your channel last week, and we got into a wide-ranging discussion, everything from the New Age to Hinduism to pre- and postmodern worldviews. And so I appreciate you coming on. Today, I want to talk to you kind of about what you and Andrew been doing on your new Rumble show. Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. I'm super glad to have the opportunity with it because, to be honest with you, man, like I've been making the same sort of videos for a long time. And it kind of came out of nowhere for me, this whole YouTube thing. I was kind of working at it, and I'd always done podcasts, and I'd been doing them since about 2018.
Mm-hmm.
But it was something that I just really loved doing, and I never really expected to actually make a career out of it. And then when I started Rattlesnake TV, the idea of actually getting paid and being able to make a living off it was pretty foreign to me. But then I started having a few videos do really well, and I started being able to do that. So I fell into making those sort of like debate analysis videos, and I really loved doing that. But I felt like I hit a little bit of a ceiling as well. And I am kind of a creative person, and I do enjoy challenging myself creatively. So Andrew's basically given me like, he's just like unleashed me and given me a lot of creative freedom and the ability to be able to really take a really prominent role in his new show. So I'm just so grateful for it.
Dude, well, I caught the first episode and it was great. So I look forward to what you guys are going to be doing moving forward. You mentioned that you're kind of doing podcasting. When did you kind of make the transition to like full-time YouTube or content creation, however you want to frame it? Because your channel is like almost a million subscribers. So I would guess that took years. Did it kind of happen immediately, or is this a long journey? What's kind of your story in regards to building your business?
Oh yeah. So I lived in London when I was 19. So when I was, I'll give a brief little overview of that. But when I was 19, my old man passed away, and I was in a really bad place in my life. Like I was extremely depressed and really overweight. I was about 30 kilos overweight and just in really bad habits. I would stay up all night and be gaming and eating bad food and
Right.
just basically just like the definition of like an incel. And just
Dude, you do not look like an incel, bro. You
yeah.
look like an Aussie Chad.
Well, I was for a long time there, and I was very like reclusive and everything. And then basically one day I walked into my living room, and I was living with my mum at the time, and she was on her computer, and I said, "Oh, what are you doing, mum?" And she goes, "Oh, I'm just organizing your British passport." And I was like, "Oh, that's weird. Like, thanks, I guess." So, anyways, a few weeks later, my British passport comes in the mail, and she goes, "Oh, you should go over to the UK and go and visit your older brother over there." So basically, my mum kicked me out of the house and onto a plane to the UK to go and like sink or swim, essentially. And then when I got over there, I mean, when I look back at all these things, it makes me believe in God so much more, because I just feel like there were so many times in my life where I was so vulnerable and really could have gone down a horrible path, but had people enter my life at different times to steer me in the right direction. So when I got over there, I was really overweight, really not in a happy place whatsoever, looking for love of any kind, because I was just, kind of feeling alone. And so I got there, and the place that I moved to was called Hackney Wick, right? And Hackney Wick is, have you ever seen the show Skins by any chance?
I have not.
It's a British TV show, and it's about these basically like rebel youths who all just sort of hang around the streets, and they're all sort of a little bit creative and all on drugs. That's basically what Hackney Wick was, right? It was a little area that was a little like an enclave in London, and there was all these roads around it, but nobody ever went in there. It was an old industrial area that all these creative hippies had come in and turned these old industrial warehouses that got bombed during World War II and stuff, had started essentially squatting in them and building out all of these living spaces. So it'll just be all these shoebox bedrooms, about 14 of them in a big warehouse, and then like one toilet and one kitchen, and all these people were just living for cheap in London and just throwing parties and just doing sex, drugs, and rock and roll, basically. So I got over there and I moved into one of these warehouses in the middle of Hackney Wick, and I was 19 years old and unbelievably impressionable, right? And every single night there was parties going on around me with people sniffing all sorts of drugs and
many
all sorts of debauchery. Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. And so just by pure and like I was vulnerable at that stage. So if I had have gone down that path, I would have gone all the way, 100%.
Right.
And so just by pure chance, at the place I was working at, I was talking to one of the security guards who used to be a professional boxer. And I said to him, "Oh, I've always wanted to do boxing." And so he was like, "Oh, I'll introduce you to my friend Edmund, who does boxing, who's a boxing coach." So I met this guy, Edmund. And then for the next 3 years, I would train with Edmund. We formed this really, really good relationship. He was like a father figure to me. And then so we formed this relationship where I would go and visit him like 4 or 5 times a week and train with him, like rain, hail, or shine. I would never ever miss a session. And so I spent the next 3 years just really dedicated to boxing, lost all of this weight, gained all of this discipline and everything, just because of this really amazing coach that I had in my life. This like Caribbean guy, just no bullshit, just gives it to me between the eyes, direct feedback every single time. And so it was just cool, man. Like I never touched any drugs or anything over there, despite the fact that it was happening all around me at all times. So that was super cool. So that was a really important time for me. And then I got back to Melbourne and started living there for a little while. And that's when for some reason here's what happened. Actually, I just broke up with my first girlfriend. And you know, when you have your first girlfriend, you're a real simp. And you like, I'd watched all of the Hollywood movies.
It's a big deal when you guys separate, especially if you kind of fall into puppy love. Like it's a big one. It'll rattle your world.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So I went through all of that, like the first love, the heartbreak, that sort of thing. And then she kind of made me feel like I was a bit stupid because she was from this family. Her brothers were doctors and she was like a scientist or whatever, and made me feel like I was a bit stupid. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to prove her wrong. I'm going to start listening to Joe Rogan podcasts. So I started listening to Joe Rogan podcasts and started like, I need to learn some shit, man. Like I need to get smart over here. And I started listening to a little bit of Jordan Peterson and everything. And I got really into it. And then when I got back home, I bought my first like podcasting set. I bought a few microphones, and I was like, I'm going to start a podcast because, you know, this is what Joe Rogan's doing. This is back in 2018. It's like, when was it? Yeah, 2018. So this was before everyone had a podcast.
Right.
And so I started one at my boxing gym when I got back to Australia. And I was basically interviewing a bunch of different fighters, kickboxers, boxers, professional fighters. The boxing gym had some good connections, and I was loving that, man. Like I was interviewing all these different boxers, and then we got on all these gangsters as well, these old underworld figures who were really renowned in Australia, and they've had TV shows made about them, all of these sort of like gang exploits. And I'd interview them because like the martial arts and the combat industry and the underworld are like hand in glove, basically, in every country, right? That's just the way it works. Yeah. So all the big promoters are generally mafia somehow. So yeah, and so I'd be interviewing all these different guys and hearing about all of the different fight promotions in the 80s and how they do these like really secretive bare knuckle boxing fights where it was invite only, and just really cool stories, and then different gangster stories and everything. And so I was loving that. And this was back at the time where if you told someone that you had a podcast, they were like, whoa, that's super cool, man. You've got a podcast? But now it's like you tell someone you've got a podcast and they're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We need another one of those.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So that was awesome. And then I did one about AFL football for a little while, which is like the Australian version of like the Premier League or whatever. It's Australia, we have our own sport. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I did not.
Oh yeah, you need to check it out sometime.
It's like a mixture of rugby, though, isn't it?
It's like kind of a mixture.
Like the New Zealand team, that's the one where they do the haka dance.
That's rugby. Yeah, that's rugby. But AFL is much more dynamic athletic sport than
I'm
rugby.
not familiar with that then.
I'll send you some links to it after. Like, it's a cool sport.
I know that in Australia, that there's been a handful of Australians come to the United States because to play NFL football, or at least try out. I think one guy got picked up by the Chiefs, and then here in Indianapolis, we have the Colts. One guy was brought over to be like a punter and a kicker. He didn't end up making the team, but he had like a super strong leg. I don't know if it was AFL or rugby.
It is. Yeah. No, it's AFL. We also had Jared Hayne, who's a rugby player, who came over and played for a little while. But because the idea in AFL is that you want to kick the ball from like 50 meters plus and score a goal. So they're really good kickers. That's why a lot of them get brought over to the United States. We've had a heap of them that have been brought over to the United States and done punting in the NFL. So so I did that for a little while. That was cool. And then the pandemic hit and we couldn't really do it anymore. But I never got paid for any of these, mind you. Like this is like pro bono. And at this stage, I was thinking, I just love doing this so much. Never even really occurred to me that it could be a career to me. It was just something that I enjoyed doing. And I was working at like the Salvos at the Salvation Army for a few years while I was doing it, working in a homeless shelter. I've got some really crazy stories from there because, you know, like working with the homeless all day, every day is like you get some crazy shit happen. So anyways, Did one, the AFL one for a little while, and then the pandemic hit. And at this stage, I'm not interested whatsoever really in politics or in the world or in anything. I listen to my Rogan podcasts, but that's about it. And so the pandemic hits, and then I started getting a little bit more red-pilled, a little bit more into politics, because I just had, I guess, a visceral reaction to that. Like, why am I being locked in my house? Australia was really bad like this, by the way. And so I was getting locked in my house. I couldn't leave my house, and I was thinking, this is bullshit. Why is everybody cheering for this stuff? So I started to float more towards the online spaces and the people who are pushing back against it. And then I started going to different protests with my brother, who's still my producer to this day. And we started going to protests and like debating people about it in the street. Some good old clips I should post on my channel at some point. But started debating people, and then I got involved with what's called the Global Freedom Rally. A friend of mine was hosting a bunch of different interviews, pushing back against mandates and lockdowns and these sorts of things. And then after that, I kind of gave up on podcasting for about 6 months, because I was a bit like, nothing I've ever really done has gotten more than 100 views. I've been doing it for like 5 years, 6 years. I'm probably not that good at it. So, so I gave up on it, went to corporate world for about 6 months, and I just absolutely hated every moment of it. Hated every moment of it. Just not for me, man, at all. And so then started Rattlesnake TV, started really pushing for it, and then eventually had a few videos go well. Spent 3 years traveling the world with my brother, basically just going all around Europe, Asia, Latin America, America, everywhere, and just camping ourselves in different Airbnbs for about 3 years, seeing what we needed to see, and then here we are.
That's great, man. What a journey, dude. That's a fantastic story about how you kind of get to the place where you're at now. In regards to Australia, we were mentioning backstage, I'm not super familiar. Like, we have a lot of stereotypes here in the US about Australia. Obviously, the outback, there's like a stereotype, an Australian man he's kind of a rugged, down to earth, kind of salt of the earth type of guy. But when you're talking about like the coof and everything, the lockdown, like Australia it seemed to be one of the worst places to be in the world in regards to the lockdown. I mean, certainly there's, at least maybe we'll say in the Anglosphere, seemed like it was the worst in the Anglosphere. What kind of is the general conversation today is going to be about the death of the West, but could you give a little bit of a perspective on like what's going on in Australia in regards to many of the trends that we're seeing in the Western world, mass immigration, turning away from God, progressive, relativistic morality? Because one of the things it seemed like Australian people are a little bit more critical of Israel. I mean, we're in the United States and we're essentially an occupied nation. And so our leaders are absolutely beholden to the Israeli lobby. Can you just give like a brief little overview of like, what's the context in Australia?
Well, unfortunately, they have AJAC in Australia, which is like APAC.
It is. Okay.
It's the Israeli lobby. They're hugely influential in Australia as well in terms of the politicians.
But wasn't there an Australian politician recently speaking out against them? I thought there was like a viral video.
Jared Rennick. Yeah, okay. Jared Rennick is a really cool politician. Like he'd have my vote. He's great. I actually interviewed him back when I was doing my anti-lockdown stuff, which is interesting. And now he's really quite a prominent politician, but great guy, and a real truth teller, which is fantastic. But he has been pilloried for his stance against it. But I just don't think, like, when you think of Australia, what you have to think about is that we have it really good over there, right? Like, we are almost we're such an insular culture, very insulated from the ills of the rest of the world. Right. Because if you think about it, man, like to mess up Australia, you would have to be genuinely like special, because we are completely geographically isolated.
Right.
We don't have like a border we don't share a border with any other countries. You have to travel on a boat to get here, which people still do. But like to get to Australia, you have to basically board a boat in Timor or in Indonesia or one of these places and travel to Australia. People don't really do that as much. But to America, you just have to cross the southern border or even the northern border.
Right.
In the UK, you just have to cross the British Channel, which is a little bit easier. So it's very easy for us to keep people out. We just need to have a coast guard. And Tony Abbott, another politician, a while back was doing that, and he was basically, there was this big campaign against keeping the boat people out. The boat people. So this is the most Australian thing ever. The boat people, get the boat people out. So yeah, I mean, but if you think about Australia's situation, we are extremely rich in natural resources.
Right.
Very, very rich in natural resources. We have a very low population, and for the most part, it was a very homogenous population as well. I mean, we've had the Chinese there basically since the gold rush, because that's one of the most important parts of Australian history is the gold rush, when they found gold in parts of Victoria and New South Wales, and we have people from all around the world coming to basically find gold in these different places to make a bit of money. Heaps of Chinese would come over as well. So we've had a lot of Chinese since the start, but not that many. Just a few. A lot of Europeans, obviously the British colonized us.
Right.
But for the most part, Australia has just been a success story, because in a few hundred years, we built one of the best civilizations, one of the most livable civilizations, basically from convicts. And the reason why we speak like we do is literally from a bunch of convicts getting released from the British, going out into the bush and just farming the land and getting drunk all day. So this is a drunken accent that we've got. Yeah. So it's been a really great success story. And in the 20th century, Australia was a much more unified place. People loved being Australian. We had a real national pride about us. And our national identity is built upon like mateship and everyone gets a fair go and all of these really Australian platitudes. And people really felt that. But then in the last 20 years or so, that's just completely gone down the drain as the politically correctness and all the wokeness has sprung up. Because essentially what Australia is we are just a knock-on from the United States. Whatever happens in the United States, it's eventually going to find its way across the ocean to Australia. So same with the wokeness. We've had a long march through the institutions as well, from the 1960s, when a lot of these intellectuals started to infiltrate the Australian universities and started to take over and subvert the Australian universities. And now we have the same thing as America, which is all of these woke sort of intersectional social justice warriors that have now infiltrated our society as well. So that's a big problem. And then we've also had a massive immigration problem over the last 20 years or so. I was just speaking to my brother yesterday about this. And when I was a kid, our population was around like 19, 20 million. And now it's up at 27 million. And it doesn't seem like that much in terms of like 6 or 7 million. But in the context of Australia, it's a lot, man. It's a lot. We've got a massive housing crisis over there now, where people can't get a house because there's a shortage. They have this really corrupt program where Indians and Chinese students and people from Nepal and places like this are just infiltrating our country, because I don't know exactly how it works, but there's some sort of a system where these people can make a lot of money getting subsidized to come over to Australia. And there's all these businesses in these different countries that are creating fake degrees and sending all the students over. Some big racket that the government's making money from. These people are making money from in India. And anyways, so nowadays you walk around Melbourne or you walk around Sydney and you feel like you're in Hong Kong. Like, it's just crazy, man. Just immigrants absolutely everywhere.
That's one of the things that I heard from a buddy who was Australian and it was just a passing comment, but he was talking about the Asian immigrants, and that he said specifically like Chinese are like taking over. And I brought up I thought I heard something about like one of the China bought some of the ports there in Australia, which was a huge deal.
Port of Darwin, yeah, like a 100-year lease.
So it sounds like, because regarding demographics, and we're going to again touch on everything that's affecting the West and fertility rates, dating, relationships, that's a huge part of it. But last I looked, it was like Australia, in regard to the Anglosphere, had the highest white demographic out of all the nations, where all the other ones, America, Canada, Britain, were being inundated with so many migrants that it's totally changing the demographics of our country. And I thought I saw where Australia was, again, I'm not sure what year the census was, but it was like 80% still white. So could you speak on that? Is that still the case, or are you afraid that Australia is going to go the same way that, I mean, the United States? I mean, Britain seems like it's totally screwed. I mean, I don't see how Britain gets out of the position they're in.
Britain's done. Britain is cactus. Yeah. You walk around London and it's literally like walking around it's like walking around Pakistan or something. That's why they call it Londonistan. Like,
Right.
yeah. So Britain's screwed. Australia is like, we can do something about it still, because we don't need all of these immigrants. But here's what I think the problem is, and tell me what your thoughts are on this, because like I think you've studied this stuff a lot. I think that it's actually kind of a problem with democracy in itself. It comes back to this idea that every 4 years in these countries they change leadership. So none of these leaders have the ability to make a long-term plan. It's all very superficial and it's all in the here and now. You're trying to get elected now. You're not going to do anything that ruffles feathers that you need to do a little bit of pain for long-term gain, right? So if you're always just trying to get elected and you're doing what's popular with the populace, then you're going to have to do things that aren't necessarily good for the long term, but look good in the short term, because there are a lot of uninformed voters, right? So no politician in Australia would even dare mention fertility rates. They would not dare mention something like that, because Australia is a very secular country, a very atheist country, very feminist. Australian women are just some of the worst you can
Really? I didn't
imagine.
realize that.
Yeah. Oh man.
Oh, wow.
Terrible. Like, the idea, if you were to tell them, like most people that you meet in Australia, that you believe in God, they'd look at you like you said that you just went to the moon yesterday or something. Yeah. And if you were to say anything if you said, for example, that you don't believe in abortion, they would look at you like you said that you're a serial killer or something. It's crazy, man. Like, it's crazy.
Wow.
So no politician is going to come out and I don't think any politician is even going to really come out and be openly pro-life in Australia. That's not going to happen. And they're also not going to come out and talk about things like the fertility rate and the nuclear family and the fact that we need to get back to traditional structures whatsoever, even though that's obviously what is needed right now. Because if we don't have that, then we're going to just have to import the third world. So what they're doing is these underhanded tactics, in my view, where they're importing the entire third world into Australia, and just heaps of Indian and Chinese and immigrants, because we've got a bit of a labor shortage and they want to just get cheap labor into the country. And then they see that the fertility rate is falling, so that they're using immigration as a tool and then disguising it as something else, because within the democratic system, there's no possible way that you could make the change that's required, because people wouldn't vote for it.
Right. No, I see exactly what you're saying. And even our conversation, this kind of connects with my personal opinion about the problems with modernity. And so, secularism, science, rationalism, democracy, and then how these things are going to lead to utopia. These are the 5 pillars of what we would call the modern period. And to your point, if you look at Putin or, Erdogan, he's been president of Turkey since 2003, Xi Jinping of China. These world leaders are able to think long term. Like, it came out like 2 years ago that China had like 100-year plan in regards to attacks on, ways to demean and degrade the United States. And it wasn't like a full frontal war. These were subversive tactics. But the fact that they've already game planned out 100 years, you cannot think of any democratic Western nation that has a plan over, again, like 10 years, maybe. But because of your point about democracy and running for elections, it's not suitable for long-term improvement and long-term trajectory. And
it just creates political division. Yeah.
It just creates political division. And it's just like, it's such a short-sighted focus on society issues, that it's just like it's already failing. And the presupposition of modernity is that we're cogs in a wheel and that we are interchangeable, right? So notice that the 5 pillars of modernity, none of it has to do with ancestry, none of it has to do with national identity, none of it has to do with religious identity. And so it's really just about you kind of creating your own sort of authentic self. You're the best version of yourself, and this is who you are. The modern man is no longer attached to the ancestral lineage and the problems of history. And because of this idea that really, I would say, is sort of totally non-traditional, almost dehumanizing idea that we're just cogs in a machine. The democratic structure, we see it in every single nation, is trying to replace people with immigrants because for them, it doesn't matter. And in fact, it's actually more expedient to get these immigrants that have, maybe lower intellectual capabilities, not as aware about certain things and issues, different cultures, that they're going to be more manipulable. And you bring them in, you put them on a welfare system, and they're going to be totally controllable by the government. And we just saw this week, Donald Trump literally got elected to mass deportations. The whole thing is going to be the largest deportation effort in American history. He said this over and over and over again. And then he gets in office, and we're not even deporting over 1,000 people a week. I mean, there's no way we're going to actually get millions and millions of people out of this country. And then he comes out this week and says, oh, the farmers told me that all the really cheap labor of, Hispanics picking vegetables and stuff in the fields and hotel workers, they're really taking a hit. So I guess I'm going to do an executive order that we're not going to take those people out. And again, it's such a modern focus because it's like the meme, GDP go up, that must mean it's good. And it's like, no, actually nations are peoples with identities and families and ancestries. And my family, my ancestors, we are heritage Americans, for whatever that means anymore. But we're British, and we've been here for a very long time. And so there's, my contention is like, what does it mean to be an American? And really kind of Australia maybe isn't in the same degree, but American identity as an Enlightenment project, and Australia is an Enlightenment project too. It's so multicultural, even from the start. You had Spanish, you had the French, you had the Native Americans, we had slaves. So, even the idea of like returning back to the heritage American identity, it seems like a long lost dream. Where Europe, I think Germany could really make a case that Germany needs to be for Germans. It's hard to make that same case in America that, America is for white American or white hair. You can't make that. It doesn't work the same way. It's not a homeland that's specifically unique to one group. And so the modernity and these democratic structures, they just replace these domestic populations, their heritage populations, for immigrants, because as long as they can, go to the factory and they can pull the levers and make sure that the machinery still works, we really don't care about you. It's basically what every Western nation is saying, every democratic nation is saying right now. And and I think this is one of the failures. So for the topic of the day, death of the West, I don't see how the West can get out of this, to your point, within the democratic structures that it currently resides in, because the enemies, I mean, if we're getting ready to go to this world war with Iran, China, and Russia, which Israel's doing everything it can to create, all three of those nations are not held by the limits of democratic re-elections. They have long-term plans and strategies, and it just seems so short-sighted for these Western nations. I just don't see, and that's why I think modernity is failing. And maybe this war, whatever it's going to happen, and we can get into some of the Orthodox thoughts on this, because some of our saints and elders have been speaking about this for years, for the last 40, 50 years. And the attack, Israel attacking the nuclear facilities of Iran, has been the first domino that we as Orthodox Christians have been told to look out for, that this is going to be the first domino in a great world war. The next one being the stepping down of Erdogan. And in fact, before we went live, I was just searching online, and it was about the end of last year. Erdogan said he's not seeking re-election in 2028. Take that whatever it means, but it just seems like so many things that our saints have been talking about, we're watching unfold before us. And as this democratic republic, what Americans always want to say, we're a republic, we're not a democracy. Okay. But we're going to go ahead and jump headfirst in defending Israel, and we have no sovereignty of our own. I mean, you look online, like on X, the vast majority of all the MAGA supporters, if they're not a politician or an outright Zionist, everybody's against what's happening. And Trump's doing a total 180 on like multiple topics. I mean, his whole thing was he's the anti-war president, and look where we're at now.
Yeah, I mean, did you see that picture that was? I saw a picture on X today, and somebody had put together all of the different tweets from all of the different politicians. I think it was that Suleiman guy. and just basically said United States is occupied.
Yeah.
And every single politician had just come out and said, God bless Israel, God bless Israel. And it reminds me of that Thomas Massey guy who came out and said, well, everyone's got an APAC guy. And I can just imagine as soon as that happened, the APAC guy texting him like, hey, buddy, where's your tweet saying God bless Israel? So,
Right.
yeah, crazy stuff, man. But you're totally right that it's impossible to create this long-term plan, and that all these other countries are doing just that. China,
Right.
like you said, have got the 2049 plan, which is the 100-year anniversary of Mao's revolution. And they said by 2049, they're going to be the superpower of the world. So
Right.
they've got that. And then you also look at the Gulf states as well, Saudi Arabia and UAE and Bahrain and these different countries. They're all just building. Like they're just putting all of their resources into building their states. And they can't do that if they are scared of being kicked out of office, because there's obviously town planning 30, 40 years into the future that they're doing. And they're, you know, to be fair, they're building some cool places. If I was the Gulf states, which I'm not, obviously, if I was the Gulf states, I thought it would have been cool to build some old, like, you know, some old, more in like the old Muslim countries and towns that used to be like way back in the day, and the old sort of architecture that they had. I thought that would have been cooler than the modern architecture. But anyways, but yeah, they're building way into the future, and we just don't have the ability to do that. We're just caught in constant political turmoil. So I don't really know what the end result of it is, but I think you're correct in saying that modernity is totally failing. And it's interesting when you look at it, because around the world, there's sort of this simultaneous move towards traditionalism that's happening everywhere, where people are sort of looking back to their roots.
Right.
In the United States, I believe that that's happening. Obviously, in the online sphere, the liberals are getting absolutely dominated in debate and in discourse. Now that we have a little bit of more of an open source of information, and people are able to sort of look at these ideas and make up their own minds, people are getting more based. I think the young generation is getting more based. Even in Australia, it's happening a little bit. Throughout Europe, you've got the more right-wing nationalist parties that are popping up. Poland just had an election where a really based right-wing populist won the presidency in Poland. They've got a prime minister and a president, but you know, and I felt like that was a really important one, because Poland is one of the countries that's on the frontier in terms of their demographics, because the other countries have just been completely inundated. Italy, France, Germany. But Poland has managed to protect their borders to an extent. And I feel like before the traditionalist sort of movement really starts to take hold, this was the Liberals' last chance at getting Poland. And all they needed to do was get their left-wing dude, get their liberal dude into office, so that in Poland, they've got a president and a prime minister. The prime minister is the one who is like responsible for make various different policies, and the president is able to veto the prime minister if he wants to. So if they had a liberal president, the prime minister is already pretty liberal. He wouldn't have vetoed anything. They would have made sweeping changes in Poland, and they would have been much more EU aligned as opposed to much more America aligned. But the president comes in now, and he's much more America aligned, and he's more of a nationalist populist. So that was really good. I feel like now Poland will be good for a little while. But you've got the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, in Germany. You've got even Marine Le Pen in France and her party, who's a little bit more nationalist. And the French, actually, I think that they will have more of a pushback. In Italy, you've got Giorgia Meloni, who's, you know, she hasn't been amazing, but she's better than the Liberals. In Holland, you've got Geert Wilders, and you've also got the Dutch Farmers Party, and these people rising up and going against the globalist liberals. So there is a rise happening all around the world. And then obviously we talked about the Western world as well, like the more America, Australia. Canada's screwed, by the way. But
Canada is absolutely screwed. Canada is screwed. They're in the same position as Britain.
I can't believe that they've just elected. It just blows my mind. But I guess
they don't learn. I mean, but that shows you how feeble they are as a population, that Donald Trump mentioned that they might become the 51st state, and that was enough for them to like not care about the last 8 years of Trudeau and what's happened in their country, and just the massive demographic transformation. I mean, it's only been like 15 years that Canada just was totally changed, and because Donald Trump said some stuff that hurt their fifis, they just go ahead and okay, we're going to go back to the liberals. It's like, what the, like, what a weak mentality. And that's why they're in the position they are. And, you know, and the same thing with Britain. I mean, I hope that there wasn't, what's the one guy that started, he was with UKIP and
Nigel
now he's
Farage.
with Reform, UK
Farage.
Reform. So go ahead.
Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage. Yeah. Hopefully something happens there, but who knows? And I
Thing
think,
is, man, like even Farage and even the Reform Party in the UK are like soft liberals, man.
they are.
Unfortunately,
And
people look at them like they're super based, and you know they're better than nothing. Like I've supported them on my channel because they're better than what the UK currently has. But they are like basically modernist classic liberals, if you know what I mean, like 80s and 90s classical liberals. Everyone can do what they want. We've got a bunch of Muslims in it. Look, we've got Muslims in our party. Like we, like they're like TPUSA having the best trans people on stage, you know, the better trans
right.
people.
Well,
So
AFD, my wife is German. I mean, their leader is a lesbian who's married to a Filipino woman.
yeah, I mean, but this is the thing though, like all of these parties all around, they have like Geert Wilders in Holland, fully like a Zio op. People call
Yeah,
him, like,
he's a huge scientist. Yeah.
yeah. And even Viktor Orban to an extent has those connections as well. And it's like we got to kind of take the best that we can get at the moment,
Right.
because that's like that's the best that we can get. It's like a slight change because the European Union is controlled by these little liberal elites in Brussels who have basically had free reign over the past few decades. So if we get a little bit more popular sentiment into the EU, then they won't be able to just basically govern from Brussels with reckless abandon like they have been. And there's a lot of problems with all of the different populist movements that are popping up around Europe. And look, man, like I wouldn't even be totally opposed to the idea of a lot of them being controlled opposition, but
Right.
I mean, it's what we're working with.
Right. The same thing here in the United States. I mean, Trump was the populist nationalist candidate, and yet it comes with all these Zionist strings. It comes with technocracy. So all the tech elites, and that's been my opinion, is that what the MAGA movement is a coalition between the Zionist powers, MAGA populism, and then the tech oligarchs. And so the first week he has Operation or Project Stargate, which is a $500 billion investment to try to win the AI race. You know, just agreed that Palantir is getting ready to do mass surveillance on the American populace, which I have videos 2 years ago saying, like, the Conservative Party is going to use technocracy, and they're going to install it through the rhetoric of conservative policies. So, like JD Vance on the Theo Von podcast, Theo was going on about his worries about Palantir, and again, he's not the most educated man in the world, but his criticisms were, yeah, not as articulate, but in the right direction. I mean, he is seeing what's going on here. And the retort by JD Vance is, yeah, but Palantir, they can track every person in the country and they can stop illegal immigrants. Okay, so I mean, like, that's our choice. We have to like give up all privacy and autonomy to be tracked by Palantir, or we just get mass immigrants. I mean, that's like the false dichotomy now we're presented with. It's like you either get technocracy or you get mass immigrants. Which one you want? You know, America first.
Yeah, dude, it's so black pilling when you really think about it. Like you either get technocracy or you get Kamala Harris.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Technocracy or Kamala Harris. Which one you want?
Yeah.
So it's yeah, and that's that is the situation generally with the West. But what would you consider the biggest problem facing Western civilization right now?
Probably the demographic collapses of, well, I think that the most devastating thing to happen is the fall of Europe. That's the most devastating thing. And that's why I keep really close tabs on European politics, because I think that obviously Christian European civilization is the greatest civilization to ever exist, bar none, not even close. And just the infiltration of the third world caused, you know, I don't know if you agree with this diagnosis, but caused by the wars in the Middle East, that basically going back to 1948, the turmoil in the Middle East when Israel was declared itself as a state, all of the different turmoil and the warfare in the Middle East. And then you've got the project for a new American century coming along, and the Americans basically being like the pit bull on a leash for the Israelis, starting these different wars, taking out destabilizing Syria and Iraq and Libya and places like this. And then you have a mass immigration coming from the Middle East, from all of these different countries into Europe and flooding Europe with basically Muslims.
Right.
And then you've got them taking out Libya as well, taking out Gaddafi, and then Libya used to act as the gateway to Europe, and Gaddafi had a good relationship with the Europeans, and he would keep migrants out of Europe. If you were a Sudanese migrant 30 years ago, you would come to Libya to work because Libya had a much stronger economy than a lot of the different African countries, and so they would come and they'd be labor in Libya. And Gaddafi had a deal with the Europeans where they wouldn't be letting as many Africans in, as far as I can tell.
Right.
So then when Libya goes down, basically that just opens the door to African illegal immigration into Europe, and they just start flooding into Europe. The gateway is just completely open. So you have Europe getting hit from all sides with different immigrants, and that would just love to come to places like Europe because obviously they're, much more successful countries. And so that's just the most devastating thing for me, to see Europe just completely collapse over the past few decades. That's absolutely devastating. And then these beautiful, amazing civilizations are now on track to becoming the third world eventually.
Right.
I was in Naples last year, and I got out of the train station and I felt like I was in sub-Saharan Africa. Honestly, it's that bad.
That's what I've heard. I've had 2 friends go to Rome, and they said they couldn't
Yeah.
believe their eyes.
Yeah, it's incredible, man. Like it's just, yeah. And you look at all the old, those old videos that they have where they have like the Mozart playing over like another beautiful French street where people are walking around and they look so civilized and they're all well dressed and groomed and they posture standing upright. Those are the sorts of civilizations that people would fight and die for. But these current civilizations are the kinds of civilizations that I would never go to war for, unfortunately.
Right. No, I wouldn't either.
Yeah. So that is the most devastating thing for me. And then obviously as well, the rise in secularism is another thing. And I was, I was that for my whole life until I was about 25 or 26, total like Reddit Sky Daddy atheist. And yeah, that's devastating because we talked about Poland before. The thing that has kept the Polish people united over the past few hundred years, or over the past 1,000 years, really, is the Catholic Church for them. They're a pretty Catholic country, and they have been invaded multiple times by the Mongols, by the Swedes, by the Prussians, by the Russians, by the Austrian Empire, by eventually the Soviets, and by the Nazis. They've just been invaded constantly. So multiple times they've gone long periods without actually having a state. But the one thing that's been the through line for them is the Catholic Church has sort of kept them united, and it gave them a sense of identity. And I think that it's really obvious that when countries and nation states start to lose that like foundation, then they don't really know what they are anymore. Right. And this has happened hugely in America. I mean, America is synonymous with Christianity. Right? Like the founder, people say, the founders were like, deists, but the founders believed in God, and it wasn't Vishiva, it was the Christian God.
And even to your point, even when the founding fathers established free speech, they still had blasphemy laws regarding Jesus Christ. Now, these were deists, different forms of Protestants, but it shows the mentality during the 18th century that, free speech, allowing free political speech, but you don't go out in the street and then defame Jesus Christ. Like, okay, we'll arrest you for that. And people just have such cognitive dissonance when they hear free speech and think of modern America. It's like, that's not what the founding fathers had in mind at all.
Yeah, dude, 100%. And I mean, like the Constitution talks about a good and moral people. And what do you mean by a good and moral people? Like, what's a moral person? How do we know what a moral person is if it's all just a series of subjective preferences? So all of this moral relativism and atheism that we've seen like rise up in the Western world, I think it's just completely devastating for any culture to have that. Secular societies don't work, as far as I can tell, and they don't last, and they just end up in strife and civil war. If you don't have a foundation and something that you can at least all agree upon, then you're screwed, essentially.
Right.
There's only so much luxury and materialism It's only so that can only get you so far.
Right. And to your point, I mean, you look at the two longest empires were the Byzantine Empire, then I believe the Holy Roman Empire in history, both Christian. Not me personally, not a big fan of the Holy Roman Empire, but um, monarchy and a religiously informed monarchy, a religious identity. I mean, if I had to choose a political orientation, I would prefer a theocratic monarchy. Is that going to happen in America? No. But my point is, you look at how long those empires lasted, and then you look at America, which had, much more, very successful technological, monetary wealth, natural resources. And are we going to even make it, 300 years, 400 years? Probably not. Probably not. I don't expect America. So this experiment, these Enlightenment experiments, these Masonic foundations, it's all proving that this stuff is not going to stand the test of time. And you look at civilizations like China, who's gone through, cultural revolutions, the Mao Communist Revolution, but that civilization is thousands of years old, and the people are consciously aware of that. Where, in the West, everybody's, much of the domestic population is doing everything they can to destroy any sort of historical lineage and connection to the past. And everybody has these grievances about things that they've done. In Britain, they didn't even have slavery, and yet, they are affected by the same sense of self, that they suppressed minority peoples, and they subjugated all these countries, and the India, the West Indias, America, we had slaves, but the irony is, like, when you look at like these LA riots, one of the things that a lot of these illegals, and I wish all of them were deported, and I suspect that it's well over 50 million people that are in the United States, probably more, but I believe whatever the official number is, I'd probably double that. Whatever the government says, I'd double that, probably be the real number. But you see how they're talking about, oh, California used to be Mexico. Okay. And how did Mexico become Mexico? Spain colonized it. And then how did Mexico get those territories? They took them from the Native Americans. So the same people who are trying to say, oh, America, patriarchy, white people, you guys stole it from the indigenous people. It's like, wait, you just said Mexico. How did Mexico get it? The exact same process. What the hell are you talking about? And so it's just like it's an Ouroboros. It's a system that's eating itself, and I don't see how we get out of it. In regards to what is the biggest issues facing the West, I think one that is explicit is these, as you said, the demographics, but the fertility rates. My wife is German. From what I saw, I believe this is accurate, but what I was reading online is that Germany is one of the lowest in Europe. It's like 1.3. And I was reading something that no civilization has ever come back from a 1.7 reproductive rate. And 2.1 is necessary to reproduce your culture. Because if two people, if you have a mom and a dad, then you have to have at least two children to replace them in your civilization. So 2.1 is baseline for maintaining your culture. And I believe America, now again, America is quite mixed, multicultural, but it was like 1.7, but Germany's 1.3. Like, how do you recover from that? And
Japan
my wife,
and South Korea are like 0.7.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, South Korea is over. Like, North Korea is going to win the Korean War, and they haven't even shot
they haven't even
shot a missile in like
Art of War,
50, 60 years or more than that. Like 70 years. So it's just amazing to see, these countries that become highly secular and technologically advanced begin to essentially sterilize themselves and become dead. South Korea is doing it. Japan is having another one. I saw Japan recently they're going to have like a new visa for essentially Europeans to come and mate with Japanese women.
Really?
Yeah, it was because of their population problem. So, and they were
they'll probably make a TV show out of it as well.
Probably, but I mean, they chose which type of people they want to get these visas. At least that was one of the Japanese guys I heard talking about it. It's basically they want white European peoples or white Americans, white people, to get these visas to come and have children with Japanese women to help their population. But all these nations are totally crumbling right now. And the fertility rate, again, my wife is from Stuttgart. in southwestern Germany, and their demographics in regards to babies being born, only 1 out of every 3 are German born. 2 out of every 3 are Turkish or some type of maybe Afghan or some type of like Muslim community. Well, you run that for a generation or 2 with a 1.3 fertility rate, it's over. The game is over. Like Germans are going to be like an artifact of history, which is so sad to see what happened that again, World War One, ending the monarchies, again, bringing us fully into the modern democratic period. And then World War II, creating the sort of global consensus. And then what's happened to the Germans after that. I mean, they're going to go extinct after about 150 years after World War II. It's just so sad.
And I love those civilizations, man. Like I meet a lot of Russians here in Bali. And I always say, oh, I'd love to go to Russia. And some of them who are less patriotic are like, oh, why do you want to go to Russia? And I say, well, because it's like one of my favorite civilizations. I mean, pre-World War One, pre the Bolsheviks, it was great, man. Like you've got, like look at all the stuff that's come out of Russia, like Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. I'm reading a Tolstoy book at the moment, The Death of Ivan Ilyich. And it's just like, that was a great civilization before World War One. And they had great works of art and literature coming out of there, and music, and Tchaikovsky and guys like this. And then you've got Germany. I mean, some of the greatest like intellectuals to ever live have come out of Germany and Austria and places like this. Like they were really great.
German was the language of like Western philosophy for a long time.
Yeah, and all the French philosophers came and screwed it all up, didn't they?
Yeah, well, they were all like kitty diddlers and had weird sexual proclivities. And then they try to philosophically justify it.
Yeah, exactly. But a lot of those places are just like they were just great civilizations, and what Europe has become is just absolutely devastating. But the demographic crisis, man, like this, there's so many different angles to hit this from, because I was even talking to my brother last night about the Whatever podcast. People give the Whatever podcast so much shit, but I think it's honestly one of the most interesting social experiments that we've seen online over the past few years, because it's pointing out something very, very significant that nobody else really wants to point out. Besides, like guys like Fresh and Fit and all of this who do these dating podcasts, what it's pointing out is the fact that modern women these days, due to feminism, they still want all of the same traditional treatment that they've always gotten, but they just don't bring anything to the table. And that is actually true. And I've tried to actually fight against this for a while and say, it's both men and women. And I think obviously men are responsible to an extent, but I just don't think it's even at all, because feminism has really corrupted the mind of young women, and they're very impressionable as well. So these days you've got all of these women, and I experience this all the time because I'm still single and I still date a lot. Not a lot, I don't really have that much time, but I still date girls.
Right.
And a lot of them are just insufferable, if I'm totally honest. And when you have the sort of outlook that I have on things about family and marriage and these types of things, I'm really looking for those qualities in a woman, someone who has really good values and somebody who is going to bring value to my life and somebody who's not going to be quarrelsome. And if you try and if you speak about this to young women, they're like offended by it,
Right.
What do you mean? What do you mean you want someone who can cook? What am I, your slave?
Right. You're impinging on their rights to be a true woman, and a modern woman, the girl boss, liberated from the confines of the patriarchy.
Yeah, most of them have no concept of sacrifice and of responsibility and of like the self-sacrificial nature that is like the archetypal quintessential like virtuous woman. They don't understand that at all. And it's all about me, me, me. Am I happy? My feelings, my feelings, my feelings. Right. And it's just so unattractive. And I feel like, especially in Australia, this is rife, right? You get these guys in Australia who are chads. Australian dudes are chads. Like a lot of them.
Yeah, I've met a handful. They're cool ass dudes.
Yeah. A lot of them are like a big, like I'd say that Australian dudes are more handsome than other guys, because down under, like a lot of them work with their hands, and a lot of them, like, we have a big gym culture, and the sun's shining, guys are tan, and they're handsome. They earn good money because Australia has a pretty strong economy in that sense. Getting worse, but they're a pretty strong economy. They're normally pretty laid back, pretty masculine, this sort of thing, especially in like the more rural places. So Australian dudes are a catch in many ways. But the Australian women, they're really undateable. Like oftentimes you'll see this real mismatch going on. When I look at just objectively the guys, you know, responsible and stoic and, you know, good looking and all these sorts of things. And then the women who just really don't bring that much to the table. They're not traditional whatsoever. They only care about their own happiness and feelings all the time. And the Whatever podcast, back to that point, kind of like points out this and really puts its finger on it. And also, even all the conservative chicks that come on, the traditional sort of TPUSA babes that come on and stuff, they're just the same, dude. They're just the same. They all have the same outlook on things. And you just ask the questions and you realize, and this is what Andrew has pointed out so well, is that they're all just LARPing as conservatives, and really they're just feminists who just want a guy to just buy everything for them.
Usually.
Yeah. Yeah. They want to have all the same privileges and the same attitude, but they want a guy to come and provide everything for them. They've sort of figured out that loophole that they can still be a feminist, but they can have a guy who sort of like is traditionally masculine. But when you look at it and you like peel it back a little bit, you think to yourself, well, like I work my ass off in my career, and I really try and build myself, and I try and sort of harness a lot of masculine virtues to the best of my ability. Like I want a woman who does the same. And I don't want to get a bad deal in that regard. Like I want a woman who is sweet and caring and self-sacrificial and somebody who really cares about family first and foremost, and who cares about service and these types of things. And I won't settle for less. Like I won't settle, but like I genuinely won't settle for less than that, because I believe that it needs to be even in that regard.
Right. And don't marry a secular woman. I mean, now I'm newly married. You know, in October I'll be married for 1 year, so it's not like I have tons of experience being married, but at least in trying to find a wife, you know, my prerequisite was that they have to be a great mother, and then they have, you know, obviously I'm an Orthodox Christian, so I want them to be Orthodox, but I think getting a girl who's actually very devout in her religion is huge, because if a woman is willing to submit to God and then curtail her behaviors, and be a pure girl who then wants to be married and wants to have children, that you can work with, you know. And every woman has been, you know, influenced by social media and TikTok and, you know, modernity itself. But if a woman has transcendent values and she comes from a strong family and a strong community and has a sense that she wants to help the collective, you can work with that, and you can find somebody that's going to be a great mother to raise children with. But, you know, like you said, these modern girls, and I'll be on the Whatever podcast next week, but you watch these conversations and it's all about themselves. They worship themselves. And that's really the state of the sort of Luciferian underlying spirituality of all Western civilization, is that because of secularism, because of the doing away with, you know, the ancestry and our historical lineage, doing away with tradition and religion, all is left is your present moment, your pleasures, your experiences, your desires, and they just begin to worship themselves. And maybe they don't think of it that explicitly, and maybe they confess some type of religious faith, but just based on their behaviors and their actions. I mean, you can't marry someone whose sole focus is their own gratification. That will never, ever, ever work. And that's the point of marriage, is for two people to come together to choose that I'm going to do everything for the other person, and then together that is a sort of a teamwork, and that is salvific in that sense. So it's, you know, the state of modern dating in the Western world. I mean, it's the only thing that I think can turn it around is the religious revival, because if girls become religious, and we're seeing that in like trad Catholic and Orthodox communities, those are really the only Christian communities. I mean, outside of like Amish and people, the Mennonite stuff like that, those are the only communities that are reproducing and actually having large families. And you know, like the future is a race for like who's going to be there. And so, you know, my goal is that my children and my grandchildren are going to be there, and there's going to be hopefully more of them than there are of me and my wife.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I see a lot of guys these days. Like, it's really interesting, man, because the messaging of the sexes is obviously a very different thing. They are attracted to very different things and very different types of messaging. So if you look at all of the icons of the females these days, who are we talking about? We're talking about Taylor Swift, comes to mind, Kim Kardashian, all of Nicki Minaj and all these types of women. Hailey Bieber and everything. And it's like,
Yep.
what is the common denominator with all of these women? Well, generally, they're not in happy marriages. They're not like even Beyonce is another one. Like, you know, like her husband like cheats on her, and then
Right.
Rihanna, her boyfriend beat
Yeah,
her
he's
up.
going to
And
the
it's like,
Diddy party, so who knows what all he's done.
yeah, exactly right. Yeah, yeah.
And you know
Rihanna,
that she knows all that.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, and now like Rihanna, like her boyfriend beat her up, and now she's dating like ASAP Rocky. It's like, what? Like it's like they're all of these influencers and idols are just so superficial, but they're all around this idea of being this boss babe, like high status woman, and it's just so toxic compared to what it should be. Like I think that women like Rachel Wilson, for example, who has had 5 kids and who's a dedicated mother and wife, and who's actually very intelligent, and it's like the typical matron. That's what we need more of. But unfortunately, if you look at the lineage of the last sort of 60, 70, 80 years for females, what do? You get the sexual revolution, and then you get all of these women who are born into and indoctrinated into the feminist movement. And so we don't have matrons, and all of the influences fall away because they've all been raised on this idea of free love and sexual revolution and boss babes and Sex in the City. And now the young women of today are raised by TikTok, and they're raised by Kim Kardashian and Taylor Swift and all. That's their matrons. Now that's what they're looking at,
Right.
as opposed to typically what should be their matrons, which is their mothers, their grandmothers, telling them, you know, this is what it means to be a virtuous woman. But they just don't have that. They don't have those influences whatsoever.
Right.
And it's kind of similar with men in the fact that we don't really have father figures, but I think that men have much more of a yearning for purpose and much more of a yearning for really direct feedback as well.
Right.
I know for me, for example, I didn't really know this about myself, but when I met my boxing coach in London, the direct feedback that he gave me and the no bullshit was so appealing to me that I just came back and would train with him 4 or 5 times a week because I needed that. And I knew that I needed that somehow. And so men, what are they attracted to? So who do you think about? Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate. These are sort of the guys that have captured the imagination of young men over the past 10 years or so. I think that the reason why is because we need the telos, right? We need that purpose and that direction. And those are some guys that really, in their various different ways, they can provide that. Andrew Tate more in the sense of like the James Bond figure, beautiful women and fast cars, and you know what. Say what you will about Andrew Tate, but that is just appealing to young guys.
Right.
Young guys, especially if they're living a life that they don't really feel like they have much social status or purpose, they're going to look at a guy like that and say, yeah, you know, I should get in the gym and I should go and try and become a billionaire and drive a Bugatti. Jordan Peterson talks about archetypal stories, and he talks about, you know, really sort of basic advice. Clean your room.
Yeah, it's basic like dad advice.
Basic advice, but it's really interesting when you look at how much young guys just ate that up. And like I've been to multiple of his shows. He really helped me in my life. He was a massive influence for me. So young guys, they ate it up, and it's fascinating because it's like, where's our patriarchy? Where are the old guys who came along and told us, listen, stand up straight with your shoulders back, take some responsibility. Your load and even your suffering in life is going to create the purpose in your life, and it's going to armor you to eventually be the leader that you should be. And Jordan Peterson was in some way or another telling those stories. But it's interesting that really basic advice was just so appealing en masse to so many young men.
Right.
So,
and in general, I would say that trend is men realize that progression necessitates struggle. And again, like the common motif of our contemporary situation is that any sort of suffering means something's gone wrong, right? So you need to be happy. Happiness is the greatest thing that you can pursue, happiness and pleasure. And, you know, I made a lot of mistakes in my 20s and kind of went down that road where I kind of created my own worldview and did things that I wanted. Was really tied with the whole psychedelic worldview and psychedelic spirituality. But eventually you come and realize, is this all there is? Like it doesn't feel meaningful. It doesn't feel like this can like propel my life forward for the rest of my life. And men naturally want that. And so that's where I think these traditional forms of religion, Orthodoxy, trad Catholicism here in the West, it gives you something that you actually, for at least within the spiritual perspective, you have to struggle with again. And then with Jordan Peterson, cleaning up your room, taking responsibility for your space and your presentation and how you articulate, how you engage with people, really, really basic things. But what was astonishing is how many young men in the West don't have a father that told them that. That's what's astonishing. Like in a successful civilization, what Jordan Peterson did shouldn't have been necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. Yep. That's the really interesting part about it. And that's what a lot of people gloss over. They make fun of Jordan Peterson and say, oh, you're telling people to clean your room. And I guess it's fair enough in a way because it is so basic. But if you look a little bit deeper and you think, why was that so popular? Why did young men just sort of latch onto that and just like eat it up like that? And it was like you just said, it's because that really basic advice hadn't really been given to us in a way. And like I'm lucky in the sense that I had like one of the best dads you could imagine until I was about 14. He got really sick. He had a heart attack and then he was brain damaged for 5 years and then he died. Like,
oh, I'm sorry.
I would have had that. That's all right, man. It's all right. But then I would have had that. But like, but I was unfortunate in the fact that my old man passed away. But I think that like a lot of guys, so I sort of missed that teenage years where your dad teaches you how to shave and teaches you all of these different things about how to be a man. So when I discovered my boxing coach and also Jordan Peterson, those guys were hugely influential for me in teaching me those lessons about discipline and all these types of things. But I think a lot of guys in the West these days, their dads are so sort of like cucked to their feminist wives that they don't really like any form of them teaching their son about masculinity and about these sorts of virtues will be struck down in a lot of ways and by society as well. So they sort of just yield in a way and they say, okay, well, yeah, just sort of like be nice. So.
Right. That's exactly what it is. And it creates feminized men that have nothing to really stand for. Right. So the metaphor I always use is the dissolution of boundaries. I got it from Terrence McKenna back in my psychedelic days. And he was big. He was an advocate for the dissolution of boundaries. And his argument was that that's what psychedelics do. And I do agree with him. That's what psychedelics do is they begin to dissolve cognitive boundaries, perceptual boundaries around things. But once I became orthodox and I take that perspective and then look at society, I mean, the dissolution between man and animal, man and machine, male and female, nations, like every distinction, every boundary is being crossed and annihilated. And men don't operate in that world. Men need boundaries so that they have something to defend and something to stand up for. That's how we get our sense of identity. And so what is there, like you just pointed out earlier in the conversation about these militaries, Western militaries, who wants to go die for Israel? Who wants to go die for the military industrial complex? Who wants to go die for opium in Afghanistan? So the Sackler family can then make Oxycontin and then make half my country, addicted to it. Like there's nothing to stand up for. There's no traditional boundary. And men historically, that's why we went to battle. Right. And you look at the modern dating situation, men historically, I love like YouTube channels like Kings and Generals that just covers like different battles throughout history. I love watching that stuff. I do that in my free time. The audience knows I always mention that. But you watch that stuff and you realize how many men that were 16 to 25 died in battle, and how many of those men got married so young and then made sure to have a couple kids before they left to go die in battle, and often knowing that they're going to go die in battle, and often willingly doing it. Now sometimes not so, obviously there's multiple examples of that, but generally speaking, defending your people, defending your territory, defending your boundaries, defending your women and your children, that's what men do. And we can defend them by being providers and protectors and do all this stuff. But then you look at modern dating, and this is what the Whatever podcast has revealed, is that the average woman, because social media gives them attention, and the world that we live in through this technologically integrated society is all about attention. Like attention is more valuable than $1 or whatever currency you choose. Everything is based on attention. It's based on how many followers you have. How much attention can you garner? That is the most valuable commodity in the world right now. And then women, because of their sexuality and because men lusting after them, they're able to post photos on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is that they do. And then they can get this attention. And changes their self-perception, where they don't realize that historically the men that they would mate with and have a loving family and have a man to protect and provide for them, they don't want them. They think that they belong with like the Chad that maybe they had an experience with, maybe they didn't. And so the perceptions of self of women is about this sort of obsession of their own pleasure and happiness, this narcissism. And then at the same time, because they're so inflated with themselves, the people that they would historically be with, they're not going to be with. And so
Yeah.
what was it? It was like the JP Morgan article, or I forget which bank it was, but talked about by like 2040, almost it was like 40 some percent of women, I think it was specifically in America, and this was based on market trends and how they're going to sell goods and market, that they're going to be childless. So 40% of women aren't going to have, I mean, what are they going to do with themselves? Like we don't really, we talk about how AI is going to totally shift society. Well, what is the fact that all these women aren't going to have children? How's that going to affect society? What are they going to do?
Well, I think that we're already seeing the effects of it, and I see this all the time. Obviously, traveling around the world and being in a place like Bali, where there is a lot of a lot of people from all different places. I've met on many occasions over here, just through my gyms and all these different places that I go to. There's all these women who are sort of floating around, and they're about 35, 36, 37. And I've had conversations with them, and they are single and they're really attractive for their age, but it's like they are single and they're still saying, yeah, no, I want to have I want to have a family, but I don't know, like maybe not yet. And I'm like, what? Like, you're 37 years old. Like, what do you mean not yet? What do you mean you haven't made up your mind? And it's like, what they've done is that they've spent, because they're very beautiful, they've spent their whole entire 20s and even their early 30s just milking that cow. Because if you are a young woman, this is like the temptation. If you're a young woman who's attractive, you can basically have anything you want, and doors will just open up for you, and you'll just have people sending you money and buying you things, and life is just on easy mode. But if you don't actually learn how to temper that, then that will line you up for utter misery later on in life. And so all these women now are like later in their late 30s, and they're saying either they're saying, yeah, I don't know yet, maybe, life's been so good to me so far, and the feminists told me that I'd be really super hot when I'm 60, so I'm just going to keep doing this, and I'll keep on having coconuts on the beach in
60 is
Cancun.
the new 30. You didn't know?
Yeah, exactly right, exactly right. Or they're doing another thing, which is when they get to 32, 34, 35 type thing. Now they won't settle for anything but perfect. They will get the amalgamation of all the different men that they've been with and dated and, had experiences with, and they will get all the best things from all those guys, create an avatar of one guy, and then any guy who who falls short of that, they just out of there, because they don't need to settle. And it's like, no, you need to be doing the opposite, because you have now spent your whole, like, what's in it for me if I am that guy that you want? And you're successful and handsome and tall and all these sorts of things, and you have options in the dating market. What's in it for me to take you, 35, having spent the last 20 years just sort of dating around, and you don't really bring that much to the table, you got an attitude, you're a feminist, like you got a lot of baggage. What the hell is in it for me? And so these women won't settle, and they now it's like they won't be able to settle because of their standards. So it's a really perverse thing. And I was just speaking to this about this with my brother yesterday, and I was saying, man, like, it's just so backwards, because if they had have just kept their virtue and their honor until they were 25 as a really beautiful woman, you would have whatever you want for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
Like, you would have all those things you really wanted for the rest of your life, because if you're a really beautiful woman who's like a virgin when you're in your 20s, and there's going to be guys who are like top echelon guys who would love to wife you up. And that's just the fact of the matter, but they just get told the opposite. It's crazy.
Right. No, that's exactly the case. And you look at like, what is the defining characteristics between men and women? Well, women can give birth. Men can't do that. Men are stronger and more, have more physical capabilities than women. And then you look at society and again, these technologically sophisticated civilizations, and where are they moving towards? Synthetic wombs, so women can have children without having to give birth, because it may stretch my stomach a little bit. I don't want that. And then men are anxious for like a UBI. And so from a biblical perspective, God placed a curse on humanity after the fall. Men have to labor for the rest of their lives, and women have the pain of birth. But we have to go through these doorways to reach salvation, because these are necessary for us to advance and move towards God. And you look at what the technology is attempting to do, and it's attempting to ease the curse that God placed on us due to the fall. Things that are necessary for us, and things that are beneficial for us to see the world rightly. And women, because of this attention economy, because of social media, they are able to live in a fantasy world a little bit easier than men can. And it's not that men don't. I mean, the Funko Pop, video game beta, he's also living in a fantasy. You look at what does he engage in, and it's in virtual realms. It's in, like a fantasy of how society works and how it should be, and how he's a victim. Both of these people are living in a fantasy. And when you're talking about what is, we might have plenty criticisms for the Tates of the world or the Jordan Petersons, but what are they offering is like, hey guys, you got to come back to the real world, like come back to baseline reality. And that is appealing, and that's the only way that you can begin to see the world rightly. And I just see that as a big differentiation, is that in all the generations, I mean, but specifically the Xers, the millennials, and the Zers, is people live in a fantasy world, and then there's people trying to escape the fantasy world because they realize it's dystopian. And then that takes on different forms, but that is what I feel is like the fleeing of modernity, which is ending in its promise of like technological utopia, is that they realize, oh shit, the doors are getting ready to close. I better run out of here before the door locks. And when you can feel that. And so whether it be boxing, whether it be religion, whether it be, any sort of demanding enterprise that men can engage in, could be a career, could be being a plumber. That's difficult. You wake up every day, you got to go do stuff. You got to deal with, somebody's plumbing, and it may not be fun, but you got to make the bills or pay the bills. And so it's like forces you to come back to reality. And so many people are living in a fantasy. They're living in an alternative realm. They're living in a world that's totally orchestrated through propaganda, language, semantics, and mental images. And it's because of television, because of all the ways in which we engage in media, it just festers this, and people dive deeper and deeper into a fantastic delusion, and they think that they're like connected to something real.
Yeah, 100%, man. I mean, you talked before about men going off to battle, and about women and men having their sort of proper virtues in check. I was having this chat with Andrew when we were in Santa Barbara a few weeks ago, and I was asking him, what do you think the highest virtues are for men, and what are the highest virtues for women? And he said to me, for women, it's honor. And I didn't really expect that answer, because I was like, honor? What do you mean? Like, that's something I'd probably more typically associate with men, like protecting your honor, like honor killings. And, you'd go to battle and go in a one-on-one duel with someone to death for your honor. But with women, it's like, so for men, he said that the one of the highest virtues is courage, because courage is something that really keeps civilization together. But in order to have courage, you need to have something to fight for. So men typically, like what you were talking about before, in ancient battles, they would go to battle, and they would have this courage, and they would defend their people, and they would defend their families, and they would defend their areas, because they had something to defend.
Right.
And what is one of the things that men will defend most vociferously? Well, it's the honor of women, right? So if you'll protect the honor of women, and this is like the idea of chivalry as well. If women have honor, then men will want to protect that honor. So on the macro level, if like those two virtues are sort of go hand in hand. If women have honor, then men will have courage. And if women lose honor, and if we don't have honorable women in society, then we're much less likely to have brave and sacrificial men. So those dynamics, I feel like, are really falling apart. Like in today's society, the less honorable the women are, then the less courageous and brave the men will be, right?
Right. No, I think you hit something there that again connects what I just said with like the women and the beta males. It's like they're living in a realm that is not focused towards these transcendent values, right? Like you can't touch honor, you can't touch dignity, you can't touch integrity, all these things that we know are innately important, and we know that they're real. but they're not physical things. And what's, historically, men need something to defend and protect and have value of. And it begins with your blood and your lineage. But if your women aren't having children, if the divorce rate is 50%, I mean, that's what it is here in the United States. Like, where is the honor? Where is anything to be found that you can protect and hold on to? There really isn't much. And so it's like, then men, that's where you get like the MGTOW movement, and men have to figure out, like, how do I create value for me to pursue ultimate goals in my life, to have real deep meaning? Because traditionally, in a way, we lived in communities that already gave us that. We were born into it. We're born into social communities that had meaning ready for us. Religious identities, national identities, ethnic identities. And then we had, families. And so the neighbors said, oh, well, you grew up with my daughter, why don't our children get married? And then they have children. Now, the average, I believe the last thing I saw, and I'm guilty of this, I got married at 34 years old. The average age of marriage right now in the West is 32. My wife is 23. So we have a 12-year difference. I'm 35 now. But where just the whole orientation, the whole perspective of how we form families and what's the point of society is totally lost. And the point of society now for most people is make sure that they can buy cool gadgets and make sure that they can pleasure themselves in certain ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think that your dynamic with your wife is perfect, if I'm honest. And I think that in the modern world, that's one thing that people should be looking at more is as guys, right? We want to have the implied sort of leadership in the relationship. And a lot of guys will be getting married with women who are the same age as them. And sure, it can work just fine and everything. However, I mean, the more and more that women get into their late 20s and early 30s being single, the more baggage that they start to possess, especially in the modern day. I mean, if you want to get to 28, 29 and be like a virtuous Christian woman who's been single, it's like you would have to just be constantly fighting off, just kung fu fighting off all of the different temptations and vices and feminism and all these types of things. So I think it's perfectly healthy for a woman in her early 20s, especially in the modern world where guys sort of like, maybe find a little bit, take a little bit longer to actually find their purpose and everything. For women in their early 20s to be, going and dating a guy who's a little bit further along, especially in these days as well. It's, it's a little bit harder to collect resources. Back in the day, you could own a house really young and you could sort of pretty easily live off of a single income, but it takes guys a little bit longer to get to that stage these days.
Right.
So I don't see any problem with that whatsoever. Guys in their 30s marrying women who are in their early 20s, because there's that implied authority and leadership. There's also the guy's going to have a little bit more resources as well. And also the woman can come in and she can have that leadership and guidance from a man who understands the world a little bit better, and she won't get stuck in what I call the eternal abyss of the feminist chaos that is the current world.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Yeah.
No,
I think it works
and
well.
It's funny because I remember when I had yet to propose to Jenny, and we had, obviously a significant age gap, but I wanted that because I wanted a young, fertile girl. I wanted somebody who was traditional and orthodox and that I could be excited about building a life with, and that she is excited that we get to do all this together. It's not like she's, like you said, off in the abyss of feminism and then, pops her head out at 35 and tries to figure things out then. And I remember here in America, just people in my community just mentioning that, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, aren't you worried about like the age difference? Don't you want somebody more your age so you guys can relate?" And when I went to Germany to propose, which she didn't know, and I took her and her parents out to a nice Italian dinner, and then formally asked her parents. And they only spoke Russian and German. So I'm doing this through Google Translate or telling Jenny so then she can, because she knows English, so then she can speak to them in their language. But I'm trying to do it properly. Well, she comes from a conservative Protestant family. They're Volga German, so they have a unique identity. They have a mixture between German and Russian culture. And her family had no problem with it. Her parents didn't have a problem with it at all. They thought it was, at that time, I was trying to finish my PhD. I was a PhD student. I was a man. I was settled. I was conservative, religious, Orthodox. They weren't Orthodox. They're Protestant, but Jenny had already converted. She was already Orthodox. And so it's just funny because her family had a much of an old world perspective on like what the point of marriage and what the point of all this stuff is about, where people in my local community here in the US, you say it and they're like, well, what are you guys going to talk about? How are you going to relate? And it's like, what? Like, that's not going to be a problem. It's about shared values. It's about a shared perspective on the future. And so I just make that note is that, you know, within these Western society, obviously German is a Western country, but they have a unique identity being Volga Germans and maintaining their unique identity in their country. So it's just interesting to see the different opinions. And then you watch the Whatever podcast, and I'm sure this will come up when I go on the dating panel. And when I say, yeah, my wife's 12 years younger, I'm sure there's going to be some women that are going to flip out that the fact that I found that appealing and sought after that. And then she finds it appealing. Like she wanted an older man. She wanted somebody that was already settled so that because her desire is to be a mother. Like that's for her since being a little girl, that was her goal. And my goal then is to take my skills and my business and my perspective as a man and be able to provide that for her and fulfill her goal. And it's not, you know, and then again, it's a synergistic thing. So it's just funny to see how even adults, boomers, Gen Xers in the West, they are still missing the mark, where you talk with people that still have a much more of an old world perspective. Like, no, that's normal. That's okay. That's totally fine.
Yeah, man. I think that it's completely fine. My great grandparents were like 10 years apart, and they worked really well, and they lived together until their old age, and then they died within 3 weeks of each other. And it's like, especially in this was never a problem in the past, but I think in the modern world, it's actually even more applicable, because the eternal abyss of the feminist chaos for young women is a real thing. I'm telling you, it's a real thing. And guys obviously are taking a little bit longer to become the kind of guys that can provide for a family. So I think it works really well, man. But you're definitely going to get some pushback, and they're going to say to you that, oh, there's like power dynamics there. You're exploiting the power dynamics, and you're older than her. And I think that the best retort to that is just, well, isn't she a strong, independent woman? Aren't 18-year-olds really strong, independent women who can vote and go on OnlyFans and all these stuff and have abortions? And
the irony of that too is, one, I did it formally. Like how many people, you know, these people, you know, let's say the girl that's upset that there's such an age gap. Well, when she gets married, is her future husband going to like formally ask the hand of her to her parents' face? You know, I did that in a country I'd never been to, and they didn't even speak English. It was a bit of an intimidating thing to do. But
what was the reaction, by the way?
The reaction was, they looked at each other, and then they spoke. Her mother spoke Russian back into the Google Translate, and then gave it to me. And they said, yeah, we're okay. You know, we're fine with that. And mind you, I had only been with her for like about 6 to 7 months. Formally, but we were both Orthodox, and our priests were involved in this. So it's not like I manipulated her. Her priest, like when I even talked with her priest before about getting married, about engaging her, and all this different stuff. So I went through like every official avenue to make it like, look, I'm a traditional man. I'm serious about this. This is what I'm here for. This is who I am. This is what my life is going. Jenny's already aware of all this stuff. We've already talked about all the big issues. We want to do all this together. And my priest knew about it. Her priest knew about it. Her parents knew about it. I talked to her parents face to face about it. And then we spent 2 weeks together. And then I took her to Greece. That's where I officially proposed in Thessaloniki after doing an Orthodox pilgrimage. So it's like religion is the glue that brings us together. And that, like for us, we know that without Orthodoxy and Christ being a central focus of our relationship, like anything could end up breaking us apart. But if we're both trying to be the best Christians and husband and wife that we can, like it's an exciting journey. Who knows what life is going to be like in 20 years? We hope that we have multiple children, we have a nice house, we have a nice place to live, and who knows what society is going to be, but that's where we're going. That it doesn't matter about if GDP goes up, or the domestic politics. I hear so many people say, "Oh man, I'd love to have children, but I just can't think of bringing a life into the world right now." Then you're too weak too. Don't.
Mm.
You're
Yeah.
already breeding yourself out, and you deserve to be. You deserve to be, because the future is for the brave, the
Yeah.
courageous, and for
Yep.
the honorable women that get with those men and build families. And that's where, according to some of the prophecies, obviously we mentioned the Israel-Iran thing, and who knows where all this is going to go. And God willing, it doesn't go where we all think it's going to. But assuming that it does, is at the end of this great world war, America is going to be in a really dire situation. We're going to have a civil war. There's going to be a natural catastrophe. At least this is what's been seen by some of our prophets and elders, that other things that they said have certainly come true. But what they point out is the America that's going to survive this global catastrophe, they're going to be incredibly pious, religious people. And they're actually, and according to St. Paisios, they're going to be some of the most premier Christians in the world. And so it's, in my opinion, it's like, good. I want to make sure that's my grandchildren. And I'm going to, and
Yeah.
then now, because of my faith and my Orthodox faith, and now I'm married, it's like, I have something to die for. And it feels empowering as a man, right? I feel empowered. And everybody I've talked to says, just wait till you have children. You'll feel it, times 10, times 1,000. And so it's like, well, that's what we're missing out on, is like, men have to have something that you're willing to die for. This is what I proposed to Uber Boyo. Had him on a stream, and he, I don't know if his views kind of changed. And shout out to Uber Boyo. He's a great guy, Irish lad. But he's a Nietzschean, so very different worldview than myself as an Orthodox. But I've always had great conversations with him. He's a very good guy. So shout out to Uber Boyle. But I asked him, like, what are you willing to die for? Because I don't feel like you can actually be a man until there's something that you're ready to die for, because it's like, that's part of your identity. And we're getting, again, these boundaries that you're willing to protect. If there's nothing for you willing to protect, like, I don't know how you can be a fully masculine man.
Yeah, I completely agree, man. I couldn't agree more. If we don't have that in society, and that thing that people that men are willing to die for, whether it be nation, family, or even an amalgamation of those different things, then I don't really see how we survive. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, about the fall of Europe and these great civilizations, and the fall of the West, what this whole conversation is about. It's like, that used to be, and all of the things that go along with that used to be the thing that men were willing to die for. But that's altered. Like, when we talk about the biggest problems with the Western world at the moment, we've lost all of those things that we were willing to die for. So it's like we've come full circle with it.
Right. We don't have anything worthy to die for. And so we're killing ourselves, right? Drug
Yeah.
addiction, pornography, the lack of, again, our fertility rate. You just look at the West, and it literally is killing itself. And yeah, there's propaganda. Yeah, there's, forces that be, other nation states that are subversive in regards to Western, of course, but that's always been a historical case. That's always been the case. There's always been infiltration and subversion. But now, because they're, again, and this is essentially the meaning crisis, right? That Peterson and Vervaeke and that whole milieu of people have been trying to address. But without God, the meaning crisis isn't just us being able to tell the truth, and that society begins to organize itself. That's kind of Jordan Peterson's perspective. And of course, we believe that Christ is the truth. Truth is a who, not a what. It's an actual person. And so everything moving towards Christ is the truth. But without God, like, the meaning crisis can't be solved, because man, from our perspective, as from a biblical perspective, man has to be oriented towards God. And in a way, your wife then is at your back, and she's oriented towards the world, which is the children, which is the material, the emotional side of reality. And men have to be focused towards something transcendent, because if you're not, you cannot steer the ship. And that's what I believe every relationship needs to be. And when I do one-on-ones with young men that are kind of putting the pieces together and putting their life together, and they're wanting to get married, I tell them, look, you have to build your ship, which is your career. You're like, where is your life going? Who you are, the development of yourself and your person. You build the ship, and you're setting sail from destination A, which is where you're at now, to destination B, which is your ultimate goal. The woman is your shipmate. she comes and she has to decide that she wants to board that ship because she wants to go on that destination with you. And, you know, men have to realize that where we're at now, you know, the orientation towards God is going to dictate the orientation of the ship you build and what you're going to do with your life. But it's just so much more meaningful once you begin to do that. And then I believe through providence, and everybody I've spoke to, that's really been serious about moving in this direction, the providence begins to happen and the right person emerges at the very right time. Because whoever your wife is going to be, they're on a journey to become the wife that you're looking for. And at the same time, you're on a journey to become the man that that woman is looking for. And just like for me in my own story, like Jenny had to go on her own spiritual journey to question Protestantism and become Orthodox and convert to a church, you know, and that was all necessary for me to say, oh, that's exactly what I've been looking for. And then me developing myself, trying to get a PhD, building my business, you know, building my body of knowledge and my skill set, my physical capabilities. And then I can be the man that she looks at and says, that's what I've been looking for. And that's providence, and that's God's will. But you see, like we are conduits. We have to, I always say this to people is you can only, and I said this in our discussion on your stream, is you can only meet God halfway. You can only do so much. Like these people that just pray and then don't do anything with their lives. Like, what are you doing? Like God is waiting to help you, but you have to take the steps. You have to meet him halfway. You have to do it. And you may not know where it's going to go, but that's where the faith comes in. And that's really where the excitement is. And that's where the meaning is.
Oh yeah, man. 100%. I've seen this happen in various other people that I know in their life as well. People that were secular that I've sort of helped to convert. Even my older brother, for example, he's become Christian over the last few years, and the amount of change that's happened in his life since that. And it's like, you know, it's just insane. And now he's got a really amazing girlfriend who's going to be his wife, and they're going to have a family together and all these types of things. And the amount of purpose and actually true happiness that has come into his life is amazing. And I've seen this with lots of different people as well. And yeah, I'm still hoping for that same thing myself, man. But I think, as you said, it's just like the right time for it to happen. It's going to happen, man, if I'm orienting myself in the right way.
Yeah, I believe it. That's how it works, is that it's if you, and that's where, if you want to make the choice on who you're going to marry, or do you want God to make the choice on who you're going to marry? And if you choose that you want like the spouse where you're not going to have to deal with, you know, the divorce, and every relationship is difficult, right? So it's not like it's just sunshine and roses. I mean, we're dealing with fallen people here. So you have to have patience, you have to have understanding. But if you want God to do it, then do what God wants from your life and work at it and build it. And then you're on your journey. You're literally building your ship and you're setting sail, and you don't know where it's going to go. I didn't know where my life was going to go. I didn't know where all this education was going to go. Somehow I ended up on YouTube and creating, you know, these streams instead of working at a university. But it's better than what I could have envisioned. It's more freeing. It's what I truly want, even though at the time when I was making choices and building my ship, again, using that analogy, I didn't know this is where it was going to go. And young men need to take on that challenge, as opposed to, I've seen it even in some of the Orthodox circles, is that men are really smart. They put together the conspiracy theories. They totally know what's going on in the world. They see through everything. They've become Orthodox. And now they're like, where's my virgin bride? And it's like, bro, that's, you know, she's out there. I mean, maybe not a virgin, maybe so, who knows where, you know, who your person is, but you know, where do you work? I work part-time. Some measly, well, dude, how are you going to get married? Like, how are you going to provide for her? You know, what is your career? Well, I don't really know what I want to do with my life. Well, then why are you worried about getting married right now, bro? Like, and that's really difficult because the society is so sexualized that the struggle to keep your lust in check while you're trying to find a wife, that is a real spiritual battle. That is very, very difficult. And it makes people more and more anxious because it's like, dang, I got to be single and do all this stuff. And I'm dealing with all this sex and this lust around me everywhere I go. Like again, is that worth it? Is it worth like making sure you're not, you know, masturbating all the time and watching pornography can you develop that discipline? Because if you can, that discipline is going to translate to something very important regarding your life and your mission. And again, God's like waiting for you to do it. He's like waiting for you to put the pieces together so that you are the man. So he, in a sense, he just like gives you it. At least that was my experience with my wife. It was just, it just fit like a puzzle piece. There was no forcing it. There was no, going through the rigmarole of modern dating. It was, oh no, she wants exactly what I want. And I've already kind of built the thing that she wants. And now we can start this thing together.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more. But like in the world that we live in at the moment, it's just there's so many vices all around us that it's just sometimes it's like impossible to just like to fight everything away and to just be oriented in that direction.
It's
So
very,
like,
very difficult.
I couldn't agree more, man. Like that's just. But doing those and trying to those things and trying to harness those virtues is going to translate very well in the future, I'd say. But yeah, man, that was like I was you were cooking that. I was listening hard. Yeah,
I
yeah, man.
appreciate
A lot of young guys should really hear that.
I hope so. Hopefully I'm on point. Again, take it for whatever it's worth. But so in regards to, again, the death of Western civilization, what is your kind of speculations? Could be any timeline. But what are your thoughts looking at everything that's going on right now? What are your thoughts of where all this stuff is going?
Well, I mean, it was interesting hearing you talk about the Orthodox perspective before about how they sort of envisioned the nuclear facilities being bombed in Iran and that creating some sort of a global world war, and how the United States might fall into a civil war and all these types of things. I think that there's been a lot of speculation over the last few years. People saying, all right, well, this is the moment that the world war starts. Russia, Ukraine is the moment that the world war starts. This Israel-Palestine thing, that's going to have a knock-on effect, and then that's going to be when the world war starts. But then you kind of just left thinking, is this world war ever going to happen? You know, is it ever going to happen? Like, we're just all here just like thinking, oh, World War III, has it started? Has it not
Right.
started? So, I mean, I don't know really myself in terms of if it's actually going to cause that. I don't know if like the world is really ready for that, because in previous times there were actually, men wanted to fight for things, and that's not really the case these days. Warfare has changed so much. We're in a completely different generation of warfare now. I don't know what that would look like. I don't know about what biological warfare would look like. I don't know what technological warfare looks like these days, and how that all merges into a global conflict. I don't know how much of it we'd see.
Palantir, they're excited about it.
Yeah.
Oh, they're behind the drone, the Ukraine drone attack. And I was watching he's like a former colonel in the army or the military. I'm not sure which branch he's at actually, but U.S. colonel in one of the branches. And he was talking about that the attack last night that Israel had on Iran, they also had a massive drone attack, and that it was basically identical to the ways that Ukraine did theirs in Russia, which again makes you think that the United States, Palantir, some of these different, I'm sure the CIA, Mossad, they work hand in hand. And so I'm looking at these global conflicts, and Trump's promise was that he was going to end the Ukraine-Russia war. What he hasn't shut off the valve of U.S. money going to Ukraine. Now, it's not to the same degree of billions of dollars like it was during the Biden administration, but you think Trump didn't know, or at least, I mean, Hegseth, we're told that he was watching the Ukraine attack in Russia when it was happening. So we're told that the head of our armed services was aware of it. Trump says he wasn't aware of it. I find that hard to believe, but maybe that was just intentional, so he has plausible deniability or something like that. But I at this point do not see the Russian Ukraine conflict slowing down. I see that it seems like U.S. is still behind Ukraine. I mean, Trump had some great rhetoric earlier about Zelensky being a dictator. He hasn't had elections. But he's kind of backed off some of that stuff. He hasn't criticized Zelensky in a while, but now he's like critical of Putin. And now we're slowly getting involved in this massive deal with Israel and Iran. My speculation, at least in the next couple years, is I do see the U.S. falling victim to the exact same thing of these forever wars on behalf of Israel. Seems like that's where it's going. In long term, I don't know if it's 20 years. I don't know if it's 40 years. I don't know if it's 100 years. But I just don't see that business as usual in the Western world, the central banking, fiat currency, democratic structures. I just don't see how it can stay together.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
who knows when that time period is. You know, in the demographic stuff that we talked about with the fertility rates, the mass immigration, you know, I see America balkanizing. I see people moving to areas in which they live around people that they would find more desirable than other places. We're already seeing that trend happen in the United States. And I think that the precepts, so there's a famous theory in sociology by a guy named Peter Berger. It's called the sacred canopy. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in your stream or not. Forgive me if I did. Okay. So the sacred canopy, this idea is that every civilization, every group of people, you know, it could be just a tribe, but they have a sacred canopy of cultural heroes, myths, stories, virtues, and ideals that unite the people. So maybe at some point, maybe they're unspoken. It's almost it's just part of being in that culture. And that he argued that this sacred canopy is developed through a process of legitimation, that you externalize an idea, it becomes symbolized, and then other people can internalize it. And so there begins this feedback loop of externalizing idea, symbolizing it, and then other people internalizing, and then they do the same thing, and then it legitimates the sacred canopy. And so in America, our sacred canopy is totally split. I mean, people can't stand like Robert E. Lee, a Confederate general. They can't stand his statue, you know, during the Summer of Love, the BLM riots where they burned down American cities. We're taking down Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. And again, my point is not that I venerate these people. I know that they're deists. I know that they're Masons. They're, you know, again, they have shortcomings. At the same time, they did something unique in history, but there is nothing that unites Americans. I mean, and that's what the MAGA movement, in a sense, at a cultural phenomenon, when I'm looking at it through a like sociological lens, is that making America great again is really what's the unspoken thing there, is that they're trying to rebuild a sacred canopy that we all then are under and have a shared value and a shared perspective. But you look at the LA riots and we're watching, you know, thousands of people be explicitly antagonistic to the idea that if you're here illegally, you should go back. That somehow they have a right to be here because, you know, slavery, because we conquered it. I mean, and I just don't see the split between whatever MAGA is, which really is what I consider the continuation of modernity, like that it's a modernist project, and then all the progressivism or the cultural left or even the cultural right. It's that the things that unite us are falling apart. And so the only thing that can happen is internal conflict from that. There's never been, at least somebody can prove me wrong, a long-term civilization that allowed for multiple languages and multiple religions and multiple groups of people to live right next to each other. And not one idea or language or religion was deemed superior by the state or the government. Nowhere in history was a civilization able to be successful in that circumstance. And that is the circumstance that every Western nation, as we talked about with immigration, is finding itself. So, you know, the sacred canopy in Germany, when I was there was a massive Turkish, like I forget what holiday it was for the Turks, but it was like a Turkish nationalism. And there was thousands of them marching through the streets and major cities in Germany, all Turkish flags. And so it's like, what do you think that is? Like, where do you think all that is going to go? Those people are not interested in assimilating. And in fact, Erdogan, the president of Turkey, made a statement like 3 or 4 years ago. I remember I covered it in a stream, saying the amount of Muslim immigration into Europe is a feat that the caliphs of the Ottoman Empire could have only dreamed of. Because when they got defeated at the Battle of Vienna, that was as far as they ever were able to reach into Europe. But now the amount of Muslim men, military men in Europe, he said this is phenomenal for him. He's like, we could never dream that this could be possible. And so from that perspective, you already see within the Muslim world, this is not about assimilation. This is about takeover. And And the West, I mean, like we said, they have nothing to fight for. They have no sacred canopy. They have no collective orientation. Um, I I just don't see how it resolves itself except for explicit combat. Like the
Yep.
only way that Europe, if it was to ever rid itself of the situation it's in, is it obviously has to change its fertility rates, but it's going to be like physical violence is the only way that it's
Yeah.
going to end. And I just
Yeah,
don't
mate, you
see
already
the
see
gumption
this.
of the
Yeah.
Europeans willing to do that. Western Europeans.
No, they don't. Yeah, no way. And you already see this around England. You've got the like Tommy Robinson, the English Defence League, and people like this who are trying to fight against it. And it has come to blows many times. But I think that these guys kind of all realize that obviously the Muslims who are coming into England, they have no intention whatsoever of being English, like
Right.
none at all. Especially the more hardcore ones, like their intention, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but within Muslim theology, it's like all of the lands that are Muslim, and any other land outside is basically called a battleground, right?
Yes.
Like where they
It's
need
an
to take over
opportunity
it.
for conquest,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
then
exactly.
demonstrates the favor of Allah of Muslims over the infidels.
Yeah, and we don't really understand that as
Mm-mm.
Westerners because they all of these liberal countries that they've gone into have this idea that people are just blank slates, and that the minute you step into Germany, you all of a sudden want liberal democracy, and it's like everybody around the world has a deep internal yearning for this sort of liberal democracy, and as soon as they get over here, they're just happy liberal Democrats. It's just there's just no like historical basis for that. There's no like logical justification for that. Most of the world doesn't operate that way. History has never really operated that way. So people have like their tribal instincts, and with these Muslims coming into these European countries, their instinct is to make these places Muslim. And if you come into a liberal sort of woke place like Germany or England, these people just sort of they just roll over,
Yeah.
like, and they're
That,
just going
that
to
was
get
what I
taken over.
noticed. My experience in Europe, and I there's a lot of things. So for if anybody listening, forgive. There's a lot of things about Europe I really enjoyed. But in regards to the topic that you just brought up, I would say one of the differences. Now, I have a lot of criticisms of America. Anybody who's followed this channel knows I criticize America and the Enlightenment project that it was founded on constantly. But one of the values or virtues that I noticed the difference between like an American man, a traditional, let's just say a conservative American man, and the average European that I engaged with is the idea that you're willing to die to defend something and use guns and use physical violence to do so. It's just like it's kind of the water you swim in America. Now, not that maybe everybody's up to that task, but at least I'm in a very red state. The friends that I'm around, like that's not like, of course we would, like if somebody like, yeah, I got guns for that purpose. Like we're ready. And maybe we're not, right? But that's the mentality that there's like, and it's part of the revolutionary spirit, which actually is a negative. I'm not in favor of the revolutionary spirit. Shout out to James Billington, in regards to The Fire in the Minds of Men. It's a great book. And he talks about, since the American Revolution and the French Revolution, the West is characterized by a revolutionary spirit of constantly always changing something for the better, which means it's always in constant turmoil. Which is, if you're an elite, that's exactly what you want, because it ensures your power structure. But so I'm not in favor of the revolutionary spirit per se that is part of this ethos in America. But I do enjoy the fact that within America, like the idea that my neighbors who are very similar to me, look like me, like if something was to pop off, like we all have guns and we would like, that's an unspoken thing that we would all agree with. And in Europe, I just didn't get that sense. Like there is no sense of like, if things were to pop off, like we're doing it.
Yeah, same as Australia, dude. This is sort of what I was pointing out, that Australia has this insular culture where everything's kind of good. We didn't, like, the last time we really fought a war was the Vietnam War. We were involved in the Afghanistan War, but it was sort of over there. The last time we really had something that we really get behind is the Anzac War, which is World War One, the beaches of Gallipoli, and we still sort of venerate those guys, and we have Anzac Day, and like it's like that representation of the fallen soldiers. But nowadays, we don't really have any of that. at all. Whereas America, you've obviously had your Civil War, and people are much more attached and emotionally attached to the idea of valor and for servicemen. And
Yeah.
that's something that I notice a lot in America. And there's a much deeper sense of patriotism and
Oh my
the
God.
knowledge
Yeah.
that
Go
you
to
actually might have to
Germany and
fight for
count how many
something.
German flags you see. Come to America.
Yeah.
Almost every street corner, like everywhere. That was the first thing my wife noticed when she came to the US. She couldn't believe how many American flags there were everywhere we went. Even in like liberal cities in Chicago. I hate going to Chicago, but
Mm.
like that's where I picked her up from the airport. And everywhere we went, especially in Indiana, like there's American like patriotism. And again, it unfortunately for me as an Orthodox Christian, American patriotism is really a sort of outgrowth of the Protestant faith, and American politics sort of fulfills a theological role for many Protestant Americans. And so they think in theological terms regarding their domestic policies and domestic politics. And it's a kind of a shortcoming, because the ability to criticize and look critically at the structures that we're living in is difficult if you're constantly venerating it as like it's not uncommon for the same people that would probably be willing to defend their family in physical violence. They would at the same breath say like the Constitution is a divine document or godly inspired. It's like, no, dude, like, no, you got to separate these things, but that's part of the complexity and the difficulties of these things. So everything is a give and take. Even though I like that dimension if things were totally chaotic, but at the same time, the problems of our society are actually an outgrowth of this problem of like constant veneration and this Protestant ethos that uses politics as a religious outlet.
Yeah, yeah. But this is one of the reasons, though, that I think that America is kind of like the last frontier in a way in the Western world. And it's interesting when you talk about the future and how the Orthodox Church Fathers sort of believe that America will play a strong role in this, and that they'll actually be very pious Christian people who see the end of this. It kind of does make sense, because America does sort of have that ethos of Christianity and of patriotism, and even the way that the culture war is going right now. I mean, a lot of people are moving towards orthodoxy and moving towards a much more stronger conservative position. So it kind of does make sense. And Australia, we really, I don't know where we're going. Like, we really don't have that at all. It would have to be a huge
When you
shift for
guys
us to
gave your
really get
guns back,
anywhere.
what, like 10 years ago, or
No,
didn't you
like
guys have
30
a
years ago in the
massive gun
90s.
buyback and like so many
Yeah,
people like just unarmed themselves?
in the 90s. Yeah,
Oh, that was in the 90s. Okay, so yeah, longer than 10 years ago. Okay.
yeah,
But
yeah.
like that idea could never go through in America. Like guns and gun culture and military culture is just so ingrained into the cultural fabric. Um, they're never going to come and take away the guns. In fact, that's why that's why even the church father, the prophecies about America is that when the Great World War takes place and the majority of the battle is going to be in the Levant and around Turkey, at least according to their wisdom. America is not going to be occupied by China or Russia. America this is the kind of general military strategy is that the only way to destroy America is from within, because there's more guns than there are people. And almost everybody, all my friends have multiple guns,
Mm.
different type. And so you can't just, have a boots on the ground military occupation in the United States, because look what the Houthis did. Look what the Afghans did to the U.S. military in the mountains of Afghanistan. Like,
Yeah.
despite all the technology, despite all the weaponry, like men with guns and like a sense that they're not going to stop. And even if they die, their brother next to him is going to pick up their rifle and continue. You can't stop that. You can't
Mm.
stop the human spirit that's willing to die for something. And that's why the prophecies are that America's going to crumble from within. There's going to be a major natural catastrophe that's going to cause immense chaos, but there's going to be a civil war, and there's going to be famine. And unfortunately, and God willing, this doesn't come, hopefully, I'm not speculating saying that we're in the end times right now. I'm just talking about the signs and symbols that we use to, that our elders have given us to try to see where we're at in history. But they speculate that maybe 70% of the population is going to perish. 70. I've heard 80 to 90. Who knows what it is? God willing, that's not the case. But it's the people that preserve and the people that come out on the other side. That's who St. Paisios and Elder Ephraim said they're actually going to be incredibly pious, devout Christians, and that orthodoxy is going to thrive in the United States because of this. And we're already seeing the mass conversion and orthodoxy on a massive upward trend in the United States. So who knows how all this stuff comes together? And God willing, is if we repent, this is at least the Orthodox belief, is we repent as a civilization, and we're already seeing the mass cultural shift in regards to perceptions of Israel. I mean, even somebody like a Matt Walsh I saw today working for the Daily Wire, has been, at least historically, very much pro-Israel. Last couple years, maybe we shouldn't give them so much money, but even today, being very outspoken that Israel can defend itself, like we don't need to get involved. There's a shift occurring in regards to the American perception. And as we repent as a collective, we can push back all this, all this end time stuff, whatever is going to come. Again, we're not Protestant. We don't give dates to it. We don't give specific timelines. But as long as we choose God and we then fix ourselves and reorient ourselves, like God's mercy will push this thing back. We have some sort of agency in all of this stuff. It's just not the agency that, you go commit the violence. No, the agency is that we have to repent, become righteous people, and God will preserve us because of that. And so hopefully that's the case. But either way, at least according to some of their visions, whenever we get through the other side, they speculate that America is going to actually be one of the most pious places in the world.
I think we're going to see this weekend with those huge protests just how significant this is, what we're seeing at the moment, this current chapter, and how far along in the sort of like revolutionary left's plan is, because this is obviously something that's been happening for a little while, and they've been planning these things out and mobilizing and marching through the institutions, and a lot of the culture is sort of captured in America. So I think with this June 14 King's protest that we're about to see, like either it fizzles away and it's another summer of love that is like a really strong talking point for conservatives as to why not to elect liberals, or this becomes something much more serious. It's going to be a very significant time over the next few days.
Right. And that's where maybe this is an opportunity that Americans wake up in regards to their national identity, like with these King's protests. Already I've seen a shift in regards to some people with these riots, even within the Black community. I've been surprised to see how many in the Black community have like sided with like, look, they got to go. Like they're taking my job. They're infiltrating my community. Like Compton, for example, and in LA was historically Black, right? Like all the rap music of the 90s. Well, it's totally Hispanic now. They've kicked out all the Blacks. Maybe not all of them. I'm being a little bit hyperbolic there, but you get my point. And so even the Black community is realizing like, dang, like being on the side of mass immigration or these illegals, that is not in favor of us as a community. Now they have a lot of their own problems. All the communities in America have their own problems, especially the white community. I'm not positioning one against the other, but maybe these protests are something that will shift, just like what I feel like is happening with the attack on Iran last night is the shift on Israel. And obviously as an Orthodox Christian, I believe that we are Israel. And so the semi-secular country in the Levant is an inversion of what we are. And we believe that the Antichrist will be a Jew who runs a one world government from Jerusalem. And it's tied our beliefs with what they deem as the Greater Israel Project. For them, completing the Greater Israel Project is their Messiah coming. And obviously we have a very different interpretation of who their Messiah is. So if that is the case and people are shifting, maybe, and I've even seen Protestants, this was like, I'm just following conversations on X. I've even seen Protestant Christians, which are dominated by dispensationalist theology and Christian Zionism, even like it's just polarized. I've seen people move now saying, man, what is Israel doing? Like they're doing the opposite of what I believe is true as a Christian. And then you see the immense, like we worship Jews. They're the chosen people. We have to do everything to defend them. And so maybe this is an opportunity for a collective repentance of individuals, just putting pieces together and trying to reorient themselves in the correct direction. or it could be the exact opposite. So who knows?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know, man. I'm gonna read more into what you're saying about what the Orthodox Church Fathers think about all this. Is there any good sources I can go to?
In regards to what specifically, like the prophecies, or
Prophecies, yeah.
yeah, actually, I work with a non-for-profit called the Eschaton Vigil, and so and shout out to the Eschaton Vigil. He may be watching this. He's a good friend of mine. He has been dedicated to translating prophecies into English, and so he founded this non-for-profit, and I think he has 4 books published now where he will find manuscripts or books. Like we have one, Russia Before the Second Coming. It's a big popular book in Russian Orthodox, but it's never been translated to English. So um, we have been working. I've been trying to help popularize and get people exposed to his work and what he's doing. But his goal has been to find so many of these things that are only in Serbian, only in Greek, only in Russian, and then translate all this stuff into English so that English speaking people that are interested in what the Orthodox wisdom, the collective wisdom of the church has to say on this stuff. So yeah, if you're interested, I can send you some links when we get off here, but the works that he's done in putting this stuff together has just been fantastic, because you can then see like the perspectives and the visions of elders and saints from the 1600s to the present day. And when you start looking at like St. Paisios' stuff, I mean, he was already spotting the technocracy, digital currencies, all this stuff in the 80s. And of course, we believe that St. Paisios was gifted with a lot of blessings. He was clairvoyant. He had the gift of tongues, which is not glossolalia, speaking in gibberish. It's that there are so many stories of people going to his cell on the top of the mountain, and they would speak. Like, for example, there's a story of a Japanese man who went there. St. Paisios didn't know Japanese. He spoke Greek, but when he spoke to the man understood him in Japanese. This is what we believe to be the gift of tongues, is that just like at Pentecost, it's one message, it's multiple tongues, but it's one message, which is the opposite of the Tower of Babel, which is a man-made creation of of unity. And Pentecost is saying, no, unity comes through multiplicity. So God, the Tower of Babel, he scatters the people with multiple tongues, right? Pentecost is now all the tongues come back together to say the same truth. So St. Paisios was gifted with that ability and having the gift of tongues and being able to communicate with people in languages that he didn't know, but they heard him in their language. And there's so many, it's not just the Japanese, there's so many stories of this, that people that met him in person. So I will send you some links, but we got books like the Russian Before the Second Coming is pretty interesting. We have one, Elders on the End Times, which is from Serbia, or no, that's Romanian. And then he has a book that I'll link you up to, which is really just a quick snapshot overview of like 10, 20 different saints and everything they said regarding the eschaton and eschatology. So yeah,
I really want to
I'll
look
hook you
more
up with
into
that.
is church fathers and their lives and what they really believe and everything. That's what I would want to learn about.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll absolutely hook you up and show you some really good stuff to read. I have like 5 streams on this stuff because I've been working with the Eschaton Vigil. They're all like 3 hours long. So I plan on doing a stream. I'm waiting for Iran to respond. I know that they started to bomb Israel today, but I'll probably do a stream Sunday or Monday and try to talk about everything that's happening at least from that perspective, from the prophecies and things that are going on. So hopefully I'll do that Monday. And then I fly out Wednesday, but I will, when we get off the stream, I'll send you links to all this stuff so you can check out some of the books. And I can get copies because the publisher that he's using doesn't do international shipping as of right now. So I can let you know. You can tell me which books maybe sound interesting to you. Then I'll get them and then I can ship them to you personally.
It's a little bit hard in Bali, but yeah, I might be able to get it shipped to my address in Australia. So I appreciate
Okay,
that,
yeah,
man.
whatever works. Yeah, I'll just saying that I'll ship them to you from me so that you can actually get them.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Great, man. Well, let's we got a few super chats. Let's hit those. But man, great conversation, dude.
I really enjoyed it as usual, bro. Awesome.
Shout out to Keenan Beats. He actually makes music too. Keenan's made music for allowed me to use some of his music as well as Jim Bob. He says, loving the content lately, DPH. Good work. Also, Jake, you're killing it as well. Thanks for the stream and helping me make sense of all this.
Thanks, Keenan. Appreciate that, man.
And then I highlighted this one. The man said St. Paisios said Erdogan will fall, not step down. Well, if you go listen to Metropolitan Neophytos, who is the voice, I mean, he personally knew St. Porphyrios, he knew St. Paisios, he knew Elder Ephraim. According to his personal conversations, him falling could mean many different things. It could mean he's getting sick. It could mean he's ousted, or it could mean that he just steps down. So it can mean multiple different things. My point was that Erdogan already said that he's not seeking re-election in 2028. So take that forever. Maybe he gets sick in the next few years, and that's the unfolding of events. But that's just that's just a differentiation on a word. And so I recommend the man, whoever you are, brother, go check out Metropolitan Neophytos of Morphu, because he is the voice in our world that speaks on these issues. Boomer Slayer throws in 10. Canadian says, good to see you streaming together again, boys. Well, thank you very much, Boomer Slayer. And
Boomer Slayer.
Orthodox Boomer Grandma throws in 50, says, please pray for new St. Catherine Monastery here. Money to pay off land, and for Union of all icons to get rights to a very good Russian iconographer's images, and for Furnace to keep running at St. Jose Candle. Thanks, DPH. Well, thank you so much, Alexandria. God bless you and all that you do. And guys, if you're looking for icons, again, Alexandria sent me 2 wonderful high-quality icons. Go check out Union of all icons and see if they have something that you like. I guarantee you they do. Support our sister and her husband in the community and their business spreading the Orthodox faith. So thank you so much, Alexandria. Red Fox throws in $100. Thank you so much, Red Fox. Very generous of you. It says, greetings, Jake and Dr. DPH. DPH, thanks for your advice. I started my second BA in philosophy while in the Army. Well, glory to God, brother. Going to pursue a PhD. Love your content. Christ is King. Christ is King. Thank you so much, bro. I'm glad that whatever I said, I think that's from your stream. He had a question about philosophy or theology. Maybe it was from a different stream. I'm not sure. He asked if he should pursue philosophy or theology. But I'm glad that you took whatever I said, and hopefully it was useful in some way. And God bless you, brother, on your journey.
Thanks, Red Fox. Legend.
Dano throws in 5, says, for a long time, I've wanted these two to get together and give us some content like this. Thanks, guys. Big fans of both. Thank you, Dano.
Glad we could do it, Dano.
And Abject Fool throws in 20, says, what do you think about the Israeli bombing of Iran happening while the Cyprus Synod looking to judge Metropolitan Neophytos of Morphu later this month? Yeah, I think it's all part and parcel of things that are going on. I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with anything. If I say the word Khazaria, I'm not sure if that rings a bell for you or not, but
I watched your stream on it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You mentioned that when I was like,
yeah.
Maybe it was backstage when we were talking on your stream. But Metropolitan Neophytos, I mean, he's very outspoken. Like, he refers to Zelensky as a Khazar, the Khazar leader of Ukraine. And he had personal relationships with some of the contemporary elders and saints. And so he's been very outspoken. I mean, he's like the ultimately based Orthodox bishop. He's a metropolitan to listen to. He knows exactly what's going on, whether it be technocracy, the New World Order, homosexuality, the LGBTQ movement, critical race theory, all this different stuff. Like, he speaks out on all of it. So am I surprised that the Cyprus of Sinon is looking to judge him and potentially, diminish his status within the church? No, I'm not surprised. I think this is part of the times that we're in. And yeah, I think the Israeli bombing is the first domino. Now, again, we're Orthodox, so we don't know the timeline. Maybe this is the first domino, and the next domino falls in 4 years. We don't know. Could be. Maybe the next domino falls in 3 days. We don't know. We're just supposed to look for the signs and make sure that we're taking care of our business, right? So all this prophecy stuff should not invoke fear. And if it does make you fearful or anxious, don't listen to it. Turn the stream off right now. Get off of it. That's not the point. The point is to reassure you that God is with us, that he's given us elders that have been illuminated and they can give us eyes to see that maybe some of us don't have because of our fallenness. So it's actually something I think should be inspiring that, look, at least I have an expectation or something to look for. So thank you so much, Abject Fool, for that. Neon throws in 10, says, if we live, we live for the Lord. Amen. If we die, we die for the Lord. Whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. We have nothing to fear, and let it all be by his will. Amen. Amen. That's exactly the position that we should have, and have no fear with whatever comes. And it could be our lives. But if we're in a good place, what's there to fear? Dean Lim 2 throws in 10, says, nice discussion, COTEL and Rattlesnake TV. Thank you very much, Dean Lim 2.
Thank you.
And Neo Neon throws another one in, says, one thing I do know is if we see Enoch and Elijah again witnessing to people about repentance and following the eternal King Jesus Christ, then we should start panicking and repenting. Yeah, if you guys see Enoch and Elijah walking around on the planet, you should probably shift your priorities. And then Boomer Slayer throws in 5, says, raid Jay. Yeah, we can raid Jay. I don't know if Jay's live. I've been talking with Jake. I have not checked the internet. I have no idea. So yeah, if Jay's live, we can send you guys over there. And then Anon over on Dono Chat throws in 20, no message. So whoever you are, anonymous person out there, thank you so much for the support. Really appreciate that. And let me just check Streamlabs real quick to make sure I don't miss anyone. Yeah, and that is it. So that's going to do it for, Jacob Hindi just sent in another one. Sent in 5, says, for Jake and his handler, Andrew, Mexicans are a bigger problem than foreigners in Congress. Idiots wouldn't want to mess with your Rumble deal now. What?
It's a Spurg from over in my chat, but thanks for hooking my brother up with $5 over here. Appreciate that.
Oh, so this is one of your haters, I take it then.
It's a hater, but he's given
Hey, thanks for
my man DPH some cash, so I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah, thanks for the support, Hindi. Apparently he's got animosity towards you and Andrew. I don't get it. Mexicans are a big problem. There's a lot of big problems. So, I don't, whatever. Thanks for the $5, bro. So anyways, Jake, any last words you want to share? I mean, or tell people how they can reach you. I've tagged your YouTube channel in the title on my YouTube. So guys, if you don't subscribe, go over to Rattlesnake TV. He's tagged in the title. Just click that hyperlink. It'll take you right to his YouTube channel. Anything you want to share with the people or tell them how they can find you before we wrap up?
So Jake Rattle SNK on Instagram and on X, and then Rattlesnake TV on YouTube. But yeah, I always really appreciate these conversations, man. In terms of my own faith journey with Orthodoxy particularly, it's like having traveled the world over the last 3 years, it's been really difficult. Like I haven't been able to get into churches. I've tried a few times, but haven't really enjoyed the Protestant and even some of the Catholic services that I've been to. But looking to get more into a church community over the next year or so, and eventually hopefully become a catechumen as well. But I always really enjoy these conversations because it's sort of like helps me center again and like get my priorities right. So I really thoroughly enjoyed this.
And let me ask you a question before we wrap up.
Yeah.
How did you was it Andrew that introduced you to Orthodoxy? Was it things online before you met Andrew? What kind of maybe sparked your interest or brought Orthodoxy on your radar? I'm just curious.
Well, I didn't know anything about Orthodoxy before I started speaking to Andrew and listening to a lot of Jay's content and your content and Jim Bob's content particularly. And then I started listening a lot to Father Josiah and met Father Josiah as well, which was really, really important for me. But I would say, like when I first spoke to Andrew, I was actually watching that back the other day. The first ever time I interacted with him was on my stream after he did that Matt Dillahunty debate. I invited him on. And I was saying, yeah, but man, like the church is so broken, like you got all these LGBTQ churches and all of this. And I didn't know that there was different denominations. And then he said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, don't you see it, all of this like brokenness? He's like, you're talking about the Protestant church. You're not talking about the Orthodox church. And so I started to look into it a little bit more. And then I started to look into church history. And it was really interesting because the first 1,000 years, you obviously have a more unified church. And then 1054, you've got the schism between the Catholics and the Orthodox. And then I looked into some of the different theological differences. what's it called? They believe that like the Holy Spirit is
The
begotten of
filioque.
just the Father, the
Yeah,
filioque, and
yeah.
some of the differences between iconography and these types of things, and then how the Protestant Reformation sprung out of criticisms of the Catholic Church, and
Right.
some of the Protestants. I don't know if this is true, but it seems like some of the Protestants that first created the Protestant Reformation could have gone back to Orthodoxy, like with some of the
They
criticisms that they had.
they could have, but there was a massive. So by the time the Protestant Reformation is 1517, and by
Mm,
1453, the Ottoman take over the Byzantine Empire. So there was no more of an Orthodox emperor, and so the Orthodox communities were essentially, I mean, outside of Russia, they were dealing with a lot of Muslim conquest, and the West, there's obviously a linguistic difference, so not
mm,
everybody was able to get access or read Greek stuff. And there was a push, like I know, for example, um, I'm blanking on the last name. The gentleman that founded Methodism, somebody in the chat's going to correct me. I know. Um, he was looking at like Saint Macarius and was trying to, and that's why the Methodist Church was like a denomination of Anglicanism. Has like a doctrine of sanctification because he saw like theosis and things, but they don't have an energy essence distinction. They don't have the same paradigm for that to take place. John Wesley, thank you, Ortho Bro James. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I was having a brain fart. Normally, I'm pretty good on recall, but sometimes I
mm.
have total blanks. I knew it was John something. John Wesley, yeah. So he was reading some of the Orthodox stuff, uh, but that's like 18th century. So the Protestant Reformation already had like 150 some years in effect, but that's why Anglicanism attempts to be. Now, I'm not a fan of the Anglican Church, but Anglicanism tries to position itself as between Catholicism and Orthodoxy, because the British Isles has like an intense Orthodox history. I mean, like St. Patrick of Ireland, the conversion of the Scots, St. Columba, like these were Orthodox saints. And so Anglicanism tries to sort of have its foot in both camps, but it's still Protestant. The ecclesiology doesn't work. So there's that. But yeah, because of all those things, the reformers, and you had the Renaissance and the Enlightenment happening, and so there's this preeminence on rationalism and creating total rationalized systems. So um, that's why Protestantism, in my opinion, is more of an ideology than a religion because it doesn't have
Yeah.
sacraments. Sacraments are kind of
Well,
symbolic of your faith,
yeah.
and so
Yeah. I mean,
it's kind of
yeah.
go ahead.
I was gonna say I like when I looked into it because I didn't want to just go with something because it was trendy or because my friends were going with it. I want to go with something that I actually believe to be true, and I want to be able to assess the arguments myself and really think about what makes the most sense. And when I looked into sola scriptura, for example, that doesn't really make any sense to me. The idea that the Bible and the interpretations of the Bible are the ultimate authority, because it kind of creates a circumstance where anybody can sort of become the authority or anybody can
Exactly.
become God. And if that is the idea that our interpretations of the Bible are the ultimate authority, then who is the ultimate authority? Is it Sally and Karen in Bible Club, or is it the priests and church fathers? Because I would imagine that it would be the priests and the councils that would be the ultimate authority. So then doesn't that make the church the ultimate authority?
Right.
Like it seems illogical to me, the idea of sola scriptura, and also sola fide as well. Another
Yep.
one doesn't really make too much sense to me because I think that it just makes sense that you need a mixture of works and faith,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because without works, and if you just have faith, then like how does that make sense? That if you just sort of repent on your last moment, or I mean, maybe you could repent on your last moment. I don't know. Maybe you can help me understand this, but if somebody just has faith and they have faith, but they're working against the church their whole entire life, do they then go to heaven? I don't know.
It's a good. I mean, as Orthodox, we don't make claims about people's salvation, so it would depend on how conscious they are of everything. We always say that God judges you based on your context. So, the 80-year-old woman who lived like a Protestant woman who lived as piously as she could, is she going to go to hell because she's not Orthodox? no, God, again, I don't know her salvation, but God's going to judge her based on her intention, the purity of her heart, and the context in which she had. And that's where I tell people, like, when the Bible says, you know, seek and you shall find, and the truth shall set you free. If you really want to know the truth, like, God's providence will bring it to you. The scary part is what are you going to do with that? Because every time God gives you something to give you new vision, now your judgment on your salvation is going to be based on what you do with it. So if you were a Protestant and you did learn all this different stuff and you kind of knew what was right, and you for other worldly reasons chose the opposite, well, that's going to definitely work against you. And that's where there's like this double-edged sword, is like, knowledge, the truth will set you free, but you have to continue to pursue the truth. If not, you're going to be enslaved.
But that also makes total sense to me, because there is this idea that God is God is good, and God is the ultimate good, and is actually the representation or the essence of good, in a sense, if that makes sense. But also God is justice. So if God is ultimately just, then looking at the different circumstances of each individual person or each individual soul, and making and performing a just how do I word this, enacting justice towards that person, that makes sense to me. So if somebody doesn't have the resources, and this is why even I think that the atheists arguing against Christianity will often say, well, you're only a Christian because you were born in this place at this time. And what about the people in the Amazon rainforest who never were exposed to the Bible? They're just going to hell. And it's like, well, is that a just thing? If God is ultimately justice, would it be just for those people to go to hell, even though they never had those resources?
Right. We would, and this is where Paul in the epistles talks about how the law is written on the human heart. And so we believe that there's an innate understanding of like right and wrong morality. And so, again, we don't know the Taoist monk that's on, Wudang Mountain, and he's doing Tai Chi every morning. Is he going to go to hell? And maybe he's never left that mountain for 60 years. We don't know. But if he's, again, the best he could do is to operate morally based on what we believe is the objective moral law that's written on the human heart, that we can know when we look at something, we can feel what's right or wrong. And the only way we get past that is through conditioning, being exposed to tragedies or whatnot, that we have to be sort of conditioned to move away from the moral law that's written on our heart. So that's what, we leave that up to God. That's beyond our pay grade. And that's historically, now the papacy is kind of, or the Catholic Church has changed, especially post Vatican II, but historically they believe that you could only be saved if you were submissive to the papacy. So if you were Catholic, and the Orthodox, we say we are the whole faith. So if you want to know the truth and you want the truth, we are the truth. We are the Church of the Apostles and founded by Christ. But in regards to people's salvation and judgment, that is on a case-by-case basis. That is God's understanding. He's the only one that can know the entire intentions and everything that has gone on in your heart and your mind for the entirety of your life. So yeah, we leave that there. We had a few more super chats come in. Robert Jacob throws in 2, says David actually has a test to speak on the chosen. Okay. Thank you, Robert Jacob, for the $2, brother. Abject Fool throws in a generous $50. Thank you so much, man. He says, Sarah from Rhodes has a good quote. Quote, "It's later than you think, brother. Hasten, therefore, to do the work of the Lord." Unquote. God willing, much good can come from last night and driving people forward to orthodoxy. Amen. And hopefully it does. And Jay had a debate today, I think, with Tim Gordon and another Protestant. I caught most of it. So again, that's another way in which more and more people are just being exposed to it, because people they haven't heard of it. Orthodox doesn't evangelize in the same way like Protestants and Catholics do. So it's more like we're here doing our thing. And when you're on your journey, and people come because they've made a series of choices that Providence has brought them there. And that's why it takes you a year to 2 years to be even brought in once
Yeah, dude. I think that people often will criticize guys like Jay and Andrew for being more robust debaters, and I'm sure you've gotten this criticism as well, because you engage in these sort of debates and even these online debates. But people serve different purposes, and I think that Jay and Andrew and guys like this, in terms of orthodoxy, are doing some fantastic work by just really introducing people to the ideas. And most people don't even really know what orthodoxy is. They wouldn't know the first thing about it. But then they see these guys like Jay and Andrew who are just like, undefeated in these debates, particularly Jay in terms of the theology, and they look into it. And that's can't be anything but a positive thing.
Right. And again, it's their choice to pursue what's true that God gives them the next step. So that's where, we feel it's not on us to convince everybody of it. It's on individuals to seek God, and eventually they'll come to us. That's how we kind of see it. And
I've seen.
Go ahead.
I was going to say I've seen Father Josiah speak with a fair few like Protestants and Catholics on podcasts and everything. And one of the other things that was really appealing to me, and one of the other things that really opened my eyes, was that oftentimes they would just yield to the things that he was saying. They would just be like, yeah, that is true. It is true, but and I was like, wow, they really don't have much of an argument against him, but it's like almost that they know that orthodoxy is true in that sense, but they don't want to change their ways. It's interesting to see they just kind of yield to him in these conversations.
Right. No, I think Father Josiah, is the at least for the English speaking world. And I've met him too. He has a real presence. So anybody who's met him knows like there is a presence there. You can feel it. And he's very humble. Like I'm sure when you met him, he probably asked you to pray for him. That's usually what his go-to move. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Father Josiah, and I think he's a great representation of the faith. And yeah, God willing, he get more and more exposure, because he was huge for me. Before I became Orthodox, I consumed like every Father Josiah interview. And at that time, Patristic Nectar was very small. I had like 10,000 subscribers. This is like 2018. And I just consumed everything, because at that point, there wasn't a whole lot of great English speaking Orthodox priests, clergy, theologians. There's only a handful. And he was incredibly impactful on my journey, at least for me, like giving up my Protestantism and my American reluctantness to submit. And this is another thing that I think is a problem in America. Like I remember going to my first Orthodox service and seeing everybody kiss the hand of the priest, and I refused to do it. And my whole thing, again, I'm an American, so it's like, oh, I'm not going to kiss the hand of another man. But it's through realizing what actually that is. That's kissing the hand of the priesthood. Again, that's what this icon is right here. This is Christ, the high priest. So we don't have a vicar, right? So we don't have a pope figure that's standing in place of Christ. We say Christ is the head of the church. He is living. He is the high priest. And all priests are then in a sort of hierarchy leading back to Christ. And so when you venerate your priest, whether he could be an alcoholic, right? This is what I had a conversation with somebody that said, yeah, I get your point, but my priest, he said something, and they were really hardcore in theology, and he said something that they thought was a bit iffy, and he's like, I can't kiss his hand. I said, dude, okay, imagine you died tomorrow, or both of you guys died. Who do you think is going to be in a worse position? Like, imagine your priest is maybe an alcoholic, and he lives a secret life, but you willingly submit to him out of obedience to Christ. Do you think that's going to be held against you? Or do you think your pride, that because you feel there's a difference in ideas and your reluctantness to submit to that because you want the purest faith and you want the most base priest, which one do you think Christ would appreciate the most? And it's like so the point is about a submission to Christ. And the point is not about you like constantly criticizing and critiquing the priest so that you have the most based, absolute right, theologically correct, historically accurate priest. God willing, that's their own journey. But, my salvation isn't called into question because I was willing to submit. But that priest, his salvation certainly was. So which one do you want to be?
Yeah, I agree, man. I saw when I was at the conference and I was sitting with Father Josiah, I didn't know that was a custom, but then Jonathan Peugeot and do you know Speaker's Corner Bob? You know that guy? Speaker's Corner in England.
Oh, he was in Riverside?
No, this was at a conference in London that I met them.
Okay,
the art conference. And Peugeot and Speaker's Corner Bob walked over and like they kissed his hand, and I was like, what's that? Then I later realized that was a custom of the Orthodox tradition. Yeah,
it's the idea is that it's a blessing. It's a blessing from Christ through the priest. And it really is not dependent on, you know, how virtuous or how right the priest is. Because we don't, again, this is a longer conversation. I'll leave it at this, but we just have a different understanding of how grace works than the Catholic Church. But again, submitting, but when you have like a Father Josiah, it's easy to submit. It's easy to see, like, this man has 11 children. This man's living an Orthodox life. This man's doing everything he can. He has a thriving parish, and basically Sodom, and then Gomorrah's over in New York. And so, you know, that's the kind of people, again, that's the type of man, that's a spiritual father that young men are willing to get behind and take instruction from and listen to and be obedient to. And that's what, again, every man wants, because again, this separate conversation, but I believe men want to be in a hierarchy, and men are constantly, and this is why, you know, just like if you're in a boxing, we talked about this, I think on your stream, you know, we naturally kind of test each other, you know, and competition is a way in which we can naturally sort ourselves into a hierarchy and find out where exactly we stack up. And then we can play our role, and we feel comfortable in that. That's how men, you know, we feel comfortable once we kind of establish where everybody is and establish the hierarchy. And so I think the church then provides that same structure. And if you do have a good spiritual father, it makes it a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to when I get there, man.
Your hater throws in another $2. Thanks, Hindy. He says, so are you wit before Orthodox, so Christian? Huh? Brother, if you're going to be a hater, at least be articulate and like sharp, like make some good criticisms. Like I mean, I don't even know what this is, but I do appreciate the $2.
I've got a rule on my channel that if we've got haters and spurgs in the comments, I'll bring them up and I'll say, all right, now I want you to justify what you've said in the comments. I'm going to give you a chance here to justify what you've said and come with good arguments. And if you do, I'll keep you around. If you give good, solid, constructive criticism, or if you make good arguments, I'll keep you around. But if not, you're out of here.
Did John Hindy or Jacob Hindy, did he ever come on your stream?
Yeah. But there was no good arguments there. So it's very, very similar to what we're seeing here, unfortunately. But, you know, $7.
Hey, appreciate the $7, Hindy. Thanks for keeping me. That's going to go straight to my wife. Thank you very much. Robert throws in 10. He says, evening, doctor. Good day, Jake. Here's an impossible question. If God real, why bad thing happen? Pretty powerful argument that requires a super high IQ. Yeah. Thanks, Robert. Yeah. I think he's making fun of the general atheist argument of, if God's real, how come people die? How come there's disease?
I heard an interesting one about that the other day, and I haven't quite been able to figure this out. So maybe you can help me out with this, because people talk about objective morality and good and bad. And I want to say it was Spinoza that had because Spinoza was quite like a pious guy. He was a very religious man, right? But
he was. I think he had his own sort of perennial, like he had his own sort of monism. He had a monistic philosophy.
Okay, interesting. But I think he made the argument that objective good and evil, or objective good and bad, doesn't actually exist, because God's idea of, but like this could be totally wrong, but something like that God's idea of good and bad in terms of our human sense of good and bad, like right and wrong actions and these sorts of things, don't actually exist, because in the grand plan of everything that there is no good and there is no like necessarily good and bad because of the grand I'm not sure, but I haven't been able to quite figure out what he means by that argument. Have you heard this argument?
I'd have to look into Spinoza's theodicy. How does he explain the existence of evil? I'm actually not well read on what he thinks theologically. I'm familiar with his like philosophical system and why he's significant in history, but I never really dove into Spinoza too much, so I can't.
It kind of sounds like a predeterminist argument that nothing is actually good and bad, because in the grand plan it's all sort of figured out, and it doesn't necessarily matter about your individual actions or something like that. But like, I just if you think,
well, in that any sort of determinism, this is why free will is so important in regards to theology, because if anything is determined, then there can be no justice and there can be no rationality, because rationality demands that we can make rational decisions between two things. But if it's determined, then there's no free will, then there's no choice between the two things. And if you're a determinist, how can there be justice? Because justice insinuates that somebody had a choice and chose the wrong thing. So I'm actually, my debate, I think I told you backstage, is with a girl who's a determinist, who's actually a social justice warrior on the whatever.
She's probably going to try to give you the Sam Harris argument for determinism, or for lack of free will, in the sense that like we are just purely materialist. We are purely material and just creatures of evolution, and all we are is a series of atoms and neurons firing around, and that if I lift my arm like this, it's because there's been a complicated process of neurons firing in my body that have made my arm lift, rather than there being some sort of a soul that's detached from our human body that determines those things, right?
Right. And then I think somebody like pushed Sam Harris on his determinism and said, so did you write your books? Or was that just predetermined? You know, like that's why determinism, it's like promoting relativism. Because as soon as I say there is no truth, I'm insinuating that that's a true statement, which then nullifies the original statement that I made. And I think, I feel like being a determinist is the same thing. You're making a decision to tell me that determinism is real, but you just violated the precepts of determinism. Like you can't be upset at slavery if you're a determinist. Yeah. Because it was already determined.
Yeah.
So
true.
It logically goes nowhere.
Andrew was tying me into a pretzel in a debate when I were there last time, because you know he often with me will take the counterpoint and give me the counter arguments from like either the Calvinist ones I really struggle with, and he'll debate me from the perspective. Andrew Wilson.
Oh, okay. Oh, so okay. Yeah, Andrew.
He'll debate me to try and sharpen my tools from the other side, and so he debated me about predestination, and he was taking the Calvinist point on predestination, and I just could not get. So I couldn't give good rebuttals. Yeah.
Well, the go-to is if anybody's a determinist or predeterminist, it calls into question justice and reason, because those demand free will. And like the problem with predeterminism and Calvinism, then what's the point of sin? Because how can we be held guilty for decisions we make if it's all predetermined? That's like the big conundrum for the Calvinist. It doesn't make any sense. Like the whole point is that we can choose bad things and we're guilty for it, and that's why we have to repent. But if everything's predetermined, why would you ever need to repent? You didn't have any choice in the first place.
Is this the idea that God is all-knowing, and if God is all-knowing, then he knew everything that would happen in our lives, and he knew everything that we would do, but decided to create us anyway with that knowledge that we would eventually be condemned? That was the one that I really struggled with.
Well, the way you get out of that is that God is outside space and time. So God's already looking at the beginning and the completion of time. So from his perspective, you already made the decision. He already sees, you know, it's kind of psychedelic. He's already looking at the timeline from beginning to end. So we have agency and free will in this life, but yeah, he already knows the decision we made. We're experiencing it right now and get to kind of go on that journey and make those decisions.
Interesting. Yeah.
But he's already at the end of time. So it's like a static photo for him. It's already completed.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. It's a good one.
Boomer Slayer throws in two more, says testing to see if YouTube won't say white. So I guess your hater is asking if I'm white before orthodoxy. No, orthodoxy, that's the whole point, is that there's only unity within the church. So multiculturalism can exist in a secular context, but multiple ethnicities, just like Pentecost, can come to the true unity of the church. So no, but at the same time, we believe that God created different groups, different races, different ethnicities, and all of that is beautiful and therefore should be preserved. So any force that is trying to annihilate the distinctions between groups is a force of evil. So no, your racial or ethnic identity does not come before your religious faith, but that doesn't mean that your race and your ethnic identity is totally oblivious and unimportant. No, it's unique and it has historical significance, and God created it that way. And then we should try to preserve those things. And we allow the church to sanctify it. Red Fox, thank you so much. Red Fox throws in another 50. Wow. Says, writing a paper, the concept of human dignity, humans have intrinsic value, cannot be epistemically justified without theology. Thoughts? Yeah, ultimately, I mean, coming from an Orthodox perspective, human dignity comes from being made in the image of God, right? So we have attributes that animals don't, and dignity would be one. I mean, can a lion have rational thought? No. They operate based on instincts. People say, you'll say animals don't have language. Like, oh, well, dolphins communicate. Okay, communication and symbols and things like that. That's not the same thing as high complex use of semiotics, art, language. That's a totally different order of phenomenon. And so we say that all the uncreated energies of God, truth, reason, logic, love, mercy, compassion, these are what differentiate us from the animal kingdom, because those are the things that are natural to the essence of God. And so we are able to participate in those because we're made in the image. The animals, a lion is not held guilty because it kills something. But we can be, because we're made in the image and we have a free will and free choice. So yeah, I agree with that. Human dignity, the strongest argument for it has to be theologically founded, because as soon as you get out of theology, you're going to have to come up with some type of material reason for why we're superior or why we are unique. And you can do that, but then it becomes, well, why did you choose that one against this reason? And then it just becomes like preference. And so people are just choosing their preference to try to dignify or make humanity unique. So from an Orthodox perspective, you can't make the full argument without first being rooted in the revelation that we're made and that we're created. So anyways, thank you, Red Fox. Really appreciate that. What was that? Sorry, brother.
I just said thanks to Red Fox for supporting the stream.
Oh yeah, thanks, Red Fox. Really appreciate that, man. It's very generous of you today. I really appreciate that. But I'm going to let you get out of here, man. I didn't mean to keep you for almost 3 freaking hours. I was expecting hour and a half, 2-hour discussion, but it just keeps going on. And man, we've only got together twice, but these have been great conversations. I really enjoy them. So I hope we can do more in the future.
Yeah, man, definitely will. And when I get over to the States, we're going to have to hang out and solve the world's problems in person.
Exactly. We'll have to shoot some guns, drink some brews, and chat about the world. So anyways, thank you so much. And guys, I will be back. Like I said, Sunday or Monday. I'm leaning towards Monday because I'm putting together a totally new membership community. I'm really excited to show you guys all that. So I need probably tomorrow and Sunday to get all that stuff together. But Monday, we're going to be doing a deep dive, looking at some of the prophecies and just looking at generally what's going on in regards to Israel-Iran conflict and X and culture and America and American politics. So that's what we're going to dive into Monday. And then Wednesday, I'll be leaving for Santa Barbara, debate Saturday, dating panel Sunday. So that's kind of the schedule coming up. So guys, God bless you. Thank you all so much for the support tonight. Really appreciate it. You guys have been very, very generous. Major shout out to Red Fox and Orthodox Boomer Grandma and Abject Fool for the generous donations. And I will see you guys in the next one. As always, until then, God bless.